Hey guys, how are all of you beautiful people? Hope you are doing fine, and yes, this is the next part of my Marvel Girl Who is Spider-Girl, where I traveled to the Marvel world and became a transfer student at Empire State University. He also raised a traveling frog that could bring back specialties for him from different dimensions. Hope you like the video. Let's start. The Mark II. Has he finally built it? I looked at Mark II, who disappeared from his sight. The successful development of Mark II also meant the complete birth of Iron Man. Subsequent Iron Man armors are all improvements and scene optimizations based on Mark II. There are also various anti-XX battle armors. It's enough to see Tony's genius. Next, as long as Tony and Ironmonger become famous, the stock of Stark Industries will usher in a big rise. At that time, I won't have to live so hard. The other side. Gwen, who just returned home, pushed the door open. Mom, Dad hasn't come back yet. Gwen, who changed into her clothes when she's at the neighborhood, asked if her father, George, was at home when she arrived. After all, what she needed to prevent was to be discovered by George. And as his daughter, Gwen was aware of his father's ability to detect lies with just words. How can you become a sheriff of the New York Police Department if you don't even have these corresponding skills? He called back and said he'll be back later tonight. Let me also watch you and don't let you go out again. But fortunately, I don't have to report to him. Gwen's mother complained as she came over with a glass of water and handed it to Gwen. Thanks, Mom. Gwen kissed her on the cheek. Daddy still treats me like a kid. Who made him only have a precious daughter like you? That's your new earphones. Noticing the black earphones in her daughter's ears, Gwen's mother asked. Yes, the original earphones are broken, I bought a new one. Gwen immediately gave a ha-ha, and then said, Mom, I still have some projects to finish. I'll go back to my room first. As she said that, she handed back the glass she had finished drinking and turned to go upstairs. Gwen's mother smiled and shook her head, like father, like daughter. Back in the living room, Madam Stacy picked up the phone at home and called George. On the end of the phone, George was sitting in a black car as he seemingly observed something. And across the road is Peter Parker's house. At this time, a middle-aged man came back from outside with some freshly bought vegetables. A man next to George said, That man is Peter Parker's uncle, Ben Parker. He's a technician from a supermarket nearby. George nodded, then asked, What's the news from Group B? Peter Parker hasn't come out since he entered Oscorp Industries. Our people, without special orders, have no right to enter Oscorp Industries. No need to go in, just make sure Peter Parker is inside. Obviously, this morning, George did not completely trust Peter's words, but let Peter leave and then sent someone to follow him. At the same time, he came to the door of Peter's house to squat. It's only been a day and so far, nothing has been gained. At this moment, George's personal phone rang. Seeing that it was from home, George picked it up. His wife's voice came from the other end of the phone. Your good daughter is back. Don't worry. George glanced at his watch. It's so early today. Did she come back alone? Well, Tilda, it's just her. Okay, I'll go back after I finish my task. George hung up the phone. The police officer who was with him smiled and said, Chief, you still care so much about your daughter. Of course. Just this one daughter. There aren't many good people in that kind of school. Of course, you have to protect her. The entire police station knows that George loved his daughter. Going back to Gwen in the room in a locked door. After confirming that there's no problem, she turned on the computer on the desktop. Red Queen, my computer is ready. Please wait for a moment, Miss Gwen. Moments later, the Red Queen appeared on Gwen's computer. Miss Gwen, if anything goes wrong here, I'll let you know as soon as possible. You just have to speak directly and I'll get your message out. It will make people think you're still in the room. Okay, what I thought was really thoughtful. Gwen took off her clothes and directly revealed her spy suit, which was inside all along. She then came to the window and shot a web in a nearby building. I'll go now, Red Queen. After saying that, she jumped out. Not long after Gwen left, Gwen's mother knocked on her door with a snack. Gwen, I've prepared a snack for you. The Red Queen immediately sent the voice to Gwen's ear. Fortunately, this arrangement of AI was really effective. Otherwise, I don't know how many days I'll be grounded if they find out. Gwen rejoiced and said, Thanks, Mom, but I'm not hungry, just leave it for Dad. Hearing the response of her daughter, Gwen's mother didn't force her but said, Don't stay up late, okay? Pay attention to your body. Got it, Mom. In New York City, Gwen shuttles back and forth between buildings. The Red Queen informed, there was a robbery in the Brown block, and the victim was an old man. Thank you, Red Queen. It's time to let him know that it's not right to do bad things. Inside Tony's lab. Tony was holding an ice pack over his head. There was nothing wrong with falling from a height of 10,000 meters, but when he got home, the armor became too heavy. It smashed directly from the first floor to the ground. He also smashed one of his limited edition cars. This made Tony speechless. Yinsen on the side looked at Tony, who looked really miserable, and said with a smile, It seems that you need to replace it with a lighter aerospace titanium metal. Snapping his hand, he agreed, Very good suggestion. Jarvis, help me order aerospace titanium. Okay, sir. The new modeling is done, do you want to take a look? Release it. A set of battle armor modeling data made of titanium metal, including the Macar style, appeared in front of Tony and Ethan. This color is very bad. The armor on the screen is pure gold. Jarvis, isn't there any good color scheme? I think this is more in line with your low-key personality. Listening to Jarvis, who still understands the him in and out, Yinsen understands that the current Jarvis has reached the level of a normal person by learning AI. Yinsen joked, Your housekeeper knows you so well. Jarvis, color me in the style of that Macar. Okay, sir. Soon, the silver-white new steel armor appeared on the screen. Looking at this color scheme, Tony was very satisfied, that's it. Just then, Ethan noticed the news on TV, You have a charity party tonight. Tony looked confused, What? I'm here all day today. Then his eyes followed the direction Yinsen pointed to and looked at the TV. A reporter on TV is introducing a charity gala hosted by Tony Stark himself. And then kept criticizing Tony's recent actions. Apparently she's also a victim of Stark Industries stock. Come on, Yinsen. I'll take you to a drink. Jarvis, don't wait for me to have supper. I always don't, sir. Main City Road. Tony drove his R8 at full speed to the charity gala. Yinsen sat in Tony's car beside him and subconsciously held the door handle. He suddenly regretted his decision. Why did he follow Tony here? I'll be more safe and sound staying at home and study other things. Relax. Trust me. He, Tony, watch the road. Watch the road. After half an hour of torture, the two finally came to the door of the charity party. Tony dashingly got out of the car. Yinsen, on the other hand, had an uncomfortable look on his face. Take care of him, I'll go first. Tony casually threw his car keys to the attendant, and then walked into the charity alone. Tony's arrival is tantamount to throwing a stone on the calm water. Tony's arrival is tantamount to pandemonium. In no time, he became the center of attention. Those who knew him and those who didn't, came to greet him. Tony breezed through them all like a veteran celebrity. By the bar, Tony picked up a glass of wine and sipped it. The reason he came to this charity party today was just to see who opened it under his name. Mr. Stark. Beside Tony, Coulson's voice chimed. During this period of time, Tony locked himself in his lab and immersed in building a new toy. So Coulson has never found a chance to get close to him. But now, he finally saw Tony. From what he knew, Tony's typical arrogance. Coulson seemed calm on the surface, but only he knew how nervous he was on the inside. He knew of Tony's typical arrogance and rarely dealt with anyone he finds annoying. Especially strangers. You are Agent Coulson. Coulson did not mince words and directly showed him his identity as an agent as soon as Tony noticed him. He believed that only in this way would it attract Tony's attention. After all, a mysterious organization like them was only really attractive to ordinary people. In front of these people at the top of society, they are just stronger ordinary people. Yes, you are the one. In fact, Tony didn't know which department the other party belonged to. Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement, and Logistics Division. Or in other words, SHIELD. Gosh, that's long enough. You guys really changed your name. My gosh, aren't you tired of saying that every time you're asked? You really should change your name. Yes, a lot of people say that after hearing it. Coulson could clearly feel Tony's patience slipping away and so directly explained his purpose. We deeply sympathize with what you have experienced during this period of time. But I hope you have time to accompany me to an interview. At this time, Tony's eyes were attracted by a beautiful back in the crowd, and he immediately recognized that it was Little Pepper. And what Little Pepper was wearing tonight. Looks like he never saw her wear something like that before, and looked really sexy. Of course, I'll schedule a time, 5 days later, at 7 o'clock in the evening. I will have to leave you here, I still have something to deal with my assistant right now, bye. Tony perfunctorily shook hands with Coulson and hurriedly left. 5 days later, he said it casually. Anyway, he will just forget about it. Under Coulson's helpless eyes, Tony walked into the center of the dance and chatted with Pepper. The two danced and left. Coulson could only wait in place and wait for Tony to be ordered. After a while, he saw Tony coming in from outside. Just as he was about to try his luck again, he saw another blonde walking towards Tony. Shit, do rich people have such lucky encounters with women all the time? That girl is so pretty. Under Coulson's envious eyes full of grievance, the blonde had already started talking to Tony. Tony Stark, I didn't expect you to dare to appear here. Tony looked familiar when he saw her. But for a while, I couldn't remember when I slept. But for a while, he couldn't recall when they slept. Carly. Because he forgot the other party's name, Tony made up one. Christine. I remembered. Tony did remember that night he went to the Middle East where he saw the macaw with her. I found that you have always been a person who doesn't believe in words. I found that you're a person who doesn't believe in only words alone. Tony frowned. I think I'm a guy who believes in credibility. With his confirmation, she took out a stack of photos and put them on the bar. This town is called Gulmra, have you heard of it? When Tony saw the content in the photo, his face became mortified. There are weapons in the photo. And these weapons are all from Stark Industries, and the serial numbers on them are obviously the ones I made them destroy. How would it appear here? Tony thought of a possibility. He picked up the photo and left the hall and came through the door where Obadiah was dealing with reporters who came to interview. Tony came closer and asked, "What's going on with Gulmra?" "Tony, you don't have to worry. I did this to help you suppress the people on the board." Obadiah pressed his voice to Tony. Facing the reporters, he had an ever-present, harmless smile. "Tony, look ahead. Let's take a group photo. Are you just doing business without my knowledge?" Obadiah bit the cigar in his hand and whispered to Tony's ears, "Don't act so naive, Tony. Who do you think held this charity party? And who took care of the company's decision-making in your stead?" After he said that, Obadiah continued to deal with the reporters, leaving Tony in a daze. He never thought that since his parents died, the uncle who watched him grow into what he became now was such a person. Although he is usually arrogant and conceited, he is cynical. But for Obadiah, he asked himself that he had never treated him badly. Why would he do something like this? "Hey, didn't you go in? What are you doing here?" Yinsen, who was about to enter the ball, saw Tony standing there alone, so he came to ask curiously. Tony squeezed the photo in his hand and urged his friend, let's go back." "Yinsen, I just recovered after throwing up, will you let me go in your car again?" But looking at Tony's back, who seemed to be in a hurry to leave, Yinsen thought something must have happened. Without any other choice, he followed. "I'm so unlucky." In the car. This time Tony didn't drive fast and told Yinsen what had just happened. Yinsen cocked his head as he contemplated, "Gulmra. You know that place?" "Of course, the cave where we were imprisoned before. It's not far from there, and it's also the territory of the 10 Rings." The 10 Rings again. He was also kidnapped by the 10 Rings gang. It's also possible that this terrorist group was the one who bought the weapons he ordered to be scrapped. He did not want to believe the guess in his heart, but Tony really had a bad feeling about it. He thought it might just be a coincidence. "What are you going to do next?" "Since I said that those weapons are to be destroyed, they must be destroyed." Tony stepped on the accelerator as the roar of the engine resounded through the main city road. New York Shores. A dark shadow flashed across the dimly lit waterway. The wind pressure generated after passing by made the manhole rattle in sound. In a small alley. In this alley, there was a pair of dark-skinned couples that were keeping each other warm. Suddenly, the sound of the manhole's cover shaking made the black woman jolt in alarm. "Jace, there seems to be something over there." What's there?" "It's just me and you right now." The person who was called Jace didn't hear the movement behind him at all. Under Jace's influence, the black woman didn't continue to mind and just closed her eyes and enjoyed his company. But when she opened her eyes again, she couldn't help but scream seeing the scene in front of her. What? Blood was gushing out of Jace's former head, which was now empty. And behind him, a huge shadow slowly appeared under the dim light. The next moment, her scream subsided. The black woman also became a headless corpse, and the two corpses were dragged down the sewer. Somewhere in the sewer, there was a platform that was piled with bones. In terms of numbers, it could be deduced that there are already no less than 10 people that have been killed. After Lizard Connors enjoyed tonight's dinner, he sensibly said, "Peter, I'll be coming for you now." But when Connors aka the Lizard thought of the macaw who appeared on that day he was chasing Peter, Emperor. At the beginning, Emperor's attack directly caused serious injury to his body, and if not for his astonishing regeneration ability, he would have died that day. Connor, who transformed into a lizard, anxiously escaped, and because of his animal instinct, he's even more eager to survive. "I thought I was going to die at the state university that night," he thought. The lizard, Connor's pair of vertical pupils exuded a frightening cold look. After a while, he seemed to figure out some countermeasures, and yellow light flashed in his vertical pupils as he disappeared into the sewers. New York streets. Dozens of gangsters were beaten to the ground, moaning in pain one after another. Many of them were thrown into the trash can, not knowing if they are still alive. And in the middle of this group of people, two figures wearing white and red stood side by side. "Are you Spider-Woman?" The figure in red is naturally the Daredevil, lawyer Matt Murdock. Gwen looked at Daredevil at her side and couldn't help but take a few extra glances. This was the first time she had gotten so close to Daredevil. "Yes, I am Spider-Woman," Gwen said proudly. Daredevil looked into Gwen's location with interest. Even though he couldn't see her appearance, he could still feel his surroundings more vividly. "Ha ha, funny little girl. Do you know whose gang member you just dealt with?" "I don't know." "Hey, how can you say that to me? I'm not a little girl. I'm Spider-Woman." Daredevil smiled and said, "Okay, Miss Spider-Woman. You just dealt with Kingpin's gang members. He is not only difficult to deal with, but also holds grudges. You have to prepare yourself for crossing him in the future." "Kingpin? Who is that?" Gwen, of course, didn't know what the name Kingpin represents. Only those in the upper echelons knew such a name. But Daredevil didn't explain too much, and disappeared into the night lightly. "Hey, you haven't finished speaking yet." Gwen fluttered and came to the roof, only to find that Daredevil had already disappeared. "Red Queen, can you find Daredevil?" "Can't find him, Miss Gwen. The target is not equipped with the equipment needed for tracking." "That doesn't matter, go ahead and catch the bad guys." "It doesn't matter. I'll just go ahead and catch the bad guys. I've stopped 2 crimes tonight, and a gang fight. Let's wait and talk to AI when I go back," Gwen said a little proudly. It's like a little girl who has done a good deed and needs to be praised by grown-ups. Stopping on a high wall, Gwen watched and waited for new police reports from Red Queen. But after waiting for a while, there didn't seem to be any news, so she said, "Red Queen, let's go back and find AI." "Okay, Miss Gwen." Gwen swung towards the 13th block with the spider webs. Just as she was about to arrive at AI's place, the Red Queen immediately reported, "I found Dr. Connors, in Queens." Gwen abruptly stopped and asked, "Queens? Isn't that where Peter lived?" Without hesitation, Gwen shot a thread spider web in another direction and left. "Miss Gwen, there are special circumstances." "What is it, Red Queen?" According to information obtained from the intrusion system, Chief George was also there. "Dad. Where is he going and what is he doing?" "He's currently following Peter Parker." Hearing that George was there too, Gwen quickened her phase. At the same time, she said to Red Queen, "Can you call my father?" "No problem." After a while, the Red Queen said, the dialing failed, and the phone was turned off after Mr. Stacy's last phone call with his wife. "Mom." Gwen immediately wondered what was going on. After making sure she was home, George turned off his personal phone to avoid interfering with the mission. "Call Peter. The other party is in a signal shielding area. He has not come out since he went to Osborne Industries today." After hacking the police system and the police radio channel, she knows almost all the actions and operational details of the NYPD. "Damn, how long until we get there?" "At this rate, approximately about 10 minutes, Dr. Connors will take 6 minutes to arrive." Fast. Gwen could only hope that his father and the others would not confront Dr. Connors before she arrived. If something goes wrong, she will not be able to forgive herself. In another place, RAI, who was meditating, suddenly opened his eyes. The prompt from the Red Queen woke him up. RAI looked at the computer and asked, "What's the matter?" The Red Queen immediately told RAI about Lizard Connors, including Peter's trip to Osborne Industries. And now Gwen is trying his best to overtake there. "Peter, what's he doing at Osborne Industries? Does he want to?" If he remembered correctly, Peter developed a serum that turned Dr. Connors back into human again. How long until Gwen arrives? Miss Gwen needs 9 minutes, Connors 5 minutes. Red Queen quickly made an analogy report. Hearing her, RAI took out another custom-made earphone and put it on. "Then let's go take a look." RAI took out the Emperor's belt. Emperor's armor. Form. Activate. After suiting up, RAI followed Gwen to Peter's house, which was equivalent to having coordinates. He didn't need to fly to get there. Transfiguration. At Peter's house. Looking at the watch in his hand, George found that it was already past 10 o'clock in the evening. The lights in Peter's were also turned off, showing that the couple were already resting. "Monitor the house for a while. If there's still nothing, then we'll call it a day. Notify Group B and watch it when you change shifts. Report as soon as Peter Parker walks out of Osborne Industries." George immediately issued a series of orders. After a nod, the police detective behind him asked curiously, "Chief, does such a large lizard really exist?" Hearing him, George was silent for a while and said, "We are here to handle the case. It doesn't matter whether an overgrown tuatara exists or not. Just keep watching. SHIELD Mothership." Nick Fury listened to Coulson's report in his office. After the overview, Nick Fury sighed, "The disparity between him and his father is really big. In my impression, Howard Stark is much more approachable. And he is also a genius." In Nick Fury's view, Howard is no less talented than Tony. The only thing that limited Howard's talent was the war-torn era. After all, at the time, Howard created the first superhero in history for the country of America. A hero who still influences the America to this day. At this time, there was a knock on the door of the office. "Please come in." Agent Hill pushed open the door and walked in. "Good evening, sir. I have something to report to you." Nick Fury made a please gesture intending for her to continue. After Hill tapped a few times on the tablet, several photos appeared on the big screen in Nick Fury's office. Inside the photo is a dilapidated laboratory. Nick Fury puzzledly asked, "Why are you showing me this? Maybe this one will interest you more." Hill said. As soon as she swiped her hand, the photo of a shedded reptile skin appeared on the big screen. Seeing this thing, Nick Fury remembered what happened that night, and the healing scar on his face suddenly ached. Where did this thing come from? The New York City Police Department. The laboratory here is the Empire State University, a laboratory of Dr. Kurt Connors. The content on the bug screen changed again and revealed all of Connors' information. Is that big lizard related to this man? Agent Hill took a deep breath and said, "There's no conclusive evidence yet, but the chief of the NYPD has begun an investigation." Hearing her report, he prompted, "Hill, send the video we took when we were attacked that day to this chief." "Yes, sir." Also, Tony's side has already conflicted with Obadiah. Hill added. Has he noticed Obadiah's illegal dealings with Kingpin? Probably not yet, but he has already discovered the batch of weapons. For now, let's just watch and see what he's going to do next. Inside a private car. Seeing that there was still no movement at Peter's house, George planned to withdraw the team and go back. But suddenly, a detective exclaimed, "Hey, look at this." On his tablet, an anonymous account sent him a video for no reason. The people in the car came closer to take a look. The content of the video was very clear and could be seen from the people inside the car. At first, there seems to be nothing wrong in the video. But suddenly, there was a loud noise from the car's roof and followed by sharp claws hitting the windshield. Then, there they saw the head of a frightening lizard, with razor-sharp claws outside the windshield. Is this the molting lizard? The two young detectives behind him swallowed. As new initiates, they never saw something like this. Although they also know that there are groups like mutants in this world. But they never saw one. Can you find out who sent you the video? George had a gloomy face after watching the video. The visuals also made him realize the danger of the operation. The detective shook his head. "I can't find it, the other party is very cautious. He uses a one-time anonymous account. After sending this message, all records of the account will disappear. It's like specially made for us to see." George added, then said, "Load your bullets, guys. If you really encounter this big lizard later, don't hesitate to shoot." "Understood, sir." Click. Sounds of bullets being loaded could be heard in the car and the atmosphere suddenly became depressing. Just as everyone was holding their breath to pay attention to the surroundings, a small bang sounded from the street not far away. Although it sounded faint, it is particularly obvious on such a quiet night. George immediately made a silent gesture to several people in the car, and then let everyone get out of the car through sign language. A man went with him to check the situation. Immediately, everyone tiptoed to open the car door, and divided their troops in two ways according to George's instructions. What no one noticed was that on the roof of another house, AI who was wearing Emperor's armor arrived. Whenever he goes after he transforms, all the monitoring equipment in the area would be hacked. So with the Red Queen's interference, AI didn't have to worry about being discovered. Unless Tony and SHIELD had their satellites focused at New York City 24 hours a day. How long until Gwen arrives? Miss Gwen only has 3 minutes left to arrive. Then let's observe for now. AI could clearly see Connor's silhouette that emerged from the sewer, now hiding on the shadow of the roadside. His nose kept sniffing in George's direction, who obviously found something. The sharp-eyed Captain Stacy immediately found an opened cover of a manhole on the ground. He quickly signaled to his colleagues. The two nodded to each other and slowly approached. The two reached the edge of the manhole cover almost at the same time, holding their guns down. But it was too dark below and they could not see anything inside. There is also the obvious foul odor. George took out a flashlight directly pointing it below but found nothing extraordinary. "Chief, be careful." Just when George visibly relaxed, his colleague's reminder sounded behind him. Then he subconsciously rolled in the front direction. A sharp claw dangerously passed behind him just as he ducked to roll forward. The other detective raised his gun and fired several shots at the lizard that suddenly appeared. The flurry of gunfire immediately reverberated in the middle of the night. However, no one in the neighborhood dared to turn on the light or even peeked at the shit show going on. Some even turned their lights off and locked their doors and windows shut. The whole street remained silent. And the police officer's eyes who opened fire widened when he saw the most incredible scene in his life. "How is this possible? Miss Gwen," Connors has clashed with the detectives. "How's my dad now?" "Rest assured, they are all safe." Gwen breathed a sigh of relief and went with all her strength. What she didn't know was that what Red Queen meant was that with AI at the scene, Officer George's safety was already guaranteed. But in Gwen's opinion, AI should still be at home waiting for her to come back at this time. George, who rolled in a circle, turned around and raised his gun at Connors, the lizard behind him. Although George had seen the video earlier, even with his rich experience in handling multiple cases, directly facing the lizard's appearance still deeply shocked him. What shocked him the most was seeing the visibly recovering bullet holes that were fired just a moment ago. On the other side, the other detectives who heard the gunshots also ran over. The moment everyone saw Lizard Connors, they were all stunned, and two of them even uttered foul languages non-stop. And Lizard Connors, after seeing so many people, subconsciously took a few steps back. But it wasn't out of fear, but his instinct. He was a person with strong self-esteem, otherwise, he would not have embarked on the path of researching regeneration genes because of other people's opinion. But Connor's instinct only made the lizard, Connors, take a few steps back. Then its bestial instincts prevailed. Lizard Connors looked at the 5 or 6 people who came around, all of them were police detectives. He knew very well that the more people found out about his existence, the harder it would be to implement his plans. Not to mention now being discovered by a group of police detectives. In this case, then kill them all. The eyes of Lizard Connors flickered with murderous intent, which should be more accurately described as the kind of intent animals have when hunting for prey. Roar. Lizard Connors opened his mouth wide and roared at the two with George in front of him, spraying its saliva with a fishy foul breath. "This monster is angry. Everyone back up. Spread out." In the confrontation just now, let George understand the insignificance of their current firepower toward the lizard monster in front of them. If it became even more angry, he didn't know how much casualty it could cause. Spreading out is the most effective way to stop it. George, who gave orders, was immediately locked by Lizard Connors after analyzing that George was the head of the group of police detectives. Then deal with this one first. Lizard Connors landed on all fours, roared and flew towards Captain Stacy. Even though George has vast experience in this kind of work, those methods could only be used in human beings. At this moment, Lizard Connors moved faster than his eyes could perceive. Facing the blurring speed of Lizard Connors, George was able to react in time and pulled the trigger. Looking from above, AI was about to intervene but found a white spider rushing towards their direction. Nice timing. AI glanced at Gwen, who hurried over. Gwen, who hurried over, hadn't noticed AI, who was standing at a relatively hidden position on the roof of the house. Instead, she saw Lizard Connors charging at her father. T. Seeing that the lizard monster was getting closer and closer, knowing he could not dodge in time, he could only utter profanities, and fired a burst of bullets in his hand. The bullet just left holes in Lizard Connor's body but just regenerated afterward. Lizard Connor opened his mouth wide open, looking very menacing. His target was George's neck. Once bitten, he definitely would not be able to see the sunrise again. Just as Lizard Connor was about to reach him, Gwen appeared beside Lizard Connor, dangled by her thread. With a sonorous impact, she directly kicked Lizard Connor flying. After rolling several times on the concrete floor, he stopped, scratching the ground with his sharp claws. George, who escaped from death, broke into a cold sweat for himself. But when he saw that it was Spider-Woman who rescued him, his face became a little disgruntled again. This scene was naturally captured by Gwen. Her usually serious father was saved by herself. Thinking of this, Gwen mischievously teased him, "Hey, officer. Isn't there a thank you or something for saving your life? I didn't ask you to save me." George got up from the ground and said stubbornly, "Okay, I won't save you when he's rushed at you again." Gwen's spider sense buzzed as soon as she finished speaking. The lizard Connor, who had been kicked away, crawls on the ground again and sprints towards them. The target is still George. "Get out of the way." Gwen hurriedly shot a spider web, wrapping the head of the lizard Connor, causing him to lose his way. Then she jumped into a flying kick, hitting Connor again, but this time, he flew into the woods, knocking several trees along the way. "Look, I saved you again." George didn't want to admit it, but it was the truth again. He could only have an indignant face and wanted to say something to refute, but he couldn't say anything. In the forest, the lizard Connor slowly climbed out and stared at Gwen. "Who are you?" "Everyone calls me Spider-Woman." Gwen responded. "Do you know?" "What?" Gwen asked. "In nature, spiders are the natural prey of lizards." What Lizard Connor meant was obvious. Gwen can't fight him, so she could only be eaten by him. "Really? What if I'm a poisonous spider? Do you wanna try it out?" Lizard Connor shook his head violently and fell down on all fours. He's preparing to attack Gwen. At this moment, a harsh and loud siren sounded all around the road, coming from all directions. Lizard Connor looked at George angrily, and George shook the portable radio in his hand proudly. "I called all the surrounding precincts. We also brought heavy fire-powered weapons. Do you still want to try?" "You are not allowed to go." Lizard Connor immediately realized that he'll be at a disadvantage if he continues to entangle with them. Glancing at Peter's house for the last time, Lizard Connor slowly backed away and disappeared into the forest. When Gwen was about to catch up, the surrounding police officers suddenly surrounded her and aimed their guns toward her. "Don't move." Gwen, with an annoyed look, raised her hand and complained, "What are you doing? Why did you let him run? It will be harder to catch him next time. Catching thieves, bad guys, and now monsters are all our police station's job. You don't have to worry about it. Now, please go back with us to assist in the investigation." "I just saved you," Gwen said indignantly. George walked slowly and continued, "How could you appear here in time? We have some suspicions that you have something to do with that lizard monster." At George's signal, a police detective walked over slowly, intending to take off Gwen's hood. Gwen raised her hand, and didn't dare move. Being pointed at by a bunch of guns. How could she dare? "Miss Spider-Woman, are you ready?" Just when Gwen was at a loss, AI's voice sounded from the earphones. Gwen's heart suddenly decided, of course. Immediately, all officers' radio headsets made a screeching noise. Everyone covered their ears in pain. Gwen also took advantage of this time to kick the two people in front of her, weaved out a spider web and flew away. RAI's house. RAI stood in front of the balcony. RAI was standing in front of the balcony. He had 2 cups of tea in each of his hands, one for himself and one for Gwen, who was about to return. After waiting a while, a white figure fell onto the balcony's railings. "Welcome back, Spider-Woman." RAI greeted her while handing her a tea in his hand. "The new tea just arrived. Here, it can calm your mood." Gwen received the warm tea in her hands after taking off her hood. She drank the tea and immediately felt its effect but still felt stifled. "What's wrong?" RAI asked with concern. Gwen sat on the railing and said a little disappointedly, "I helped them, but they still wanted to arrest me. If it wasn't for you tonight, I might have been caught by my dad." RAI nodded lightly, then asked, "Do you think your father hates you, Spider-Woman?" Gwen nodded slightly. Since she was a child, she grew up admiring her father's work as a police officer. She also wanted to be like him, fight crime, and protect the city's people as Spider-Woman. But tonight, she almost got killed by her father. "Then do you like being Spider-Woman?" RAI asked. Hearing his probing, Gwen nodded heavily and then started talking about her brief experience as Spider-Woman. How she fought crimes. How happy the people she rescued were. And how she met and collaborated with the Daredevil as they resolved a gang conflict. As she continued her tale, Gwen forgot all the unpleasantness she felt earlier. She realized how she enjoyed being Spider-Woman. "Thanks, RAI. If it wasn't for you, I don't know how hard it is for me to hold on," Gwen whispered. RAI smiled, seeing her ease up. "Do what you liked the most, I'll always be here for you, my beautiful Miss Spider-Woman." "Do what you liked most, my beautiful Spider-Woman. Just know that I'm always here for you." RAI. "Thank you." The two looked at each other passionately. RAI inched himself forward and slowly wrapped his hands around her waist. "I have to say, this spider suit's material felt perfect." But when RAI was about to make his move, the prompt echoed in his mind again. "The frog cub is going on a trip, Tilda." RAI was taken aback. Can't this stupid frog find any other time than always at critical moments? But this time it's going out, so it's all right. Focusing his gaze again, RAI tightly hugged Gwen and slowly pressed his lips on hers. Gwen's body suddenly became tense and slowly softened into RAI's arms. Queens, New York City. George shook his head, still a bit dizzy as he recalled the initial confrontation. He looked at the increasing numbers of police officers from the surrounding police stations arrived at the scene. Under George's arrangement, several sewer openings around were immediately enclosed. "Captain, are we going to investigate now?" a detective ran over and asked. George glanced at him and thought, "Do you want to die that badly?" "No, we'll go down at dawn tomorrow. We'll need to collect some more powerful weaponry first. Report to me after you finished blockading every sewer opening around the block." "Yes, sir." George sat back in his car and muttered, "It seems that I can't go back tonight. There's no choice but to spend the night here." Inside S.H.I.E.L.D. Nick Fury had a dim look on his face, but it's too dark to see. It's because a large number of police officers were seen moving in the area around Queens. But earlier, the surveillance was so peaceful. So he didn't have the chance to see the appearance of the lizard monster and Spider-Woman. Hill, can you find out who hacked that piece of surveillance? I can't find the culprit, but the other party's methods are very sophisticated. As far as I know, there is only one person in New York who can do this to this degree. Nick Fury knew right away that Hill was talking about Tony. Indeed, it seems he's the only one who can fish in troubled waters through the internet under the surveillance of SHIELD. Does Tony have something to do with Spider-Woman? Nick Fury frowned. How could he have a feeling that everyone has something to do with Tony? If you can't find him now, go to sleep first. Check it out tomorrow. Hill consciously exited Nick Fury's office. Only Nick Fury was left sitting at his desk, wondering what to write. After a moment, Nick Fury took a small pager from his pocket. Rubbing his thumb on it, he said, "Carol, where are you in space now? If you were on Earth, I might be able to relax a lot." In his mind, a woman with this energy flame all over her body handed this pager into his hand, and instructed that only when the Earth is threatened with global extinction, can this be used to summon her back. In these 15 years, the pager never left him. /N, Captain Marvel's timeline is 1995, and Iron Man 1's timeline is 2010. After playing it in his hands for a while, Nick Fury put the pager back into his inner pocket. I, who had kissed Gwen for a while, let go of her in satisfaction. Gwen is like a little daughter-in-law, lying in I's arms. Gwen had a tipsy look as she was lying in I's arms. Although they remained silent, they seemed to be comfortable in each other's embrace. It was a while before Gwen remembered that it was already late in the night. If she couldn't return home by tomorrow morning, it would definitely be suspicious. I have to go back first. See you at school tomorrow morning. Only I was left standing on the balcony to watch Gwen leave. Looking at the back that shuttled through the city, he still had to complain. How can such an open country still have such a conservative family? I sat back in front of the computer, flipped his hand and took out the souvenir T-Series robot design drawing that Frog Cub just brought back today. This souvenir was directly transmitted to the Red Queen. Then he said, "Red Queen, with your current scientific field, can you design a new spider suit for Gwen? Gwen's fight tonight, though only for a little while." But I also saw that the attack method was too simple. In addition to shooting webs is just brawling. And the web shooter only has a function that could shoot straight. No problem, Master. As long as there are enough materials, a fully functional spider suit can be designed. Materials, it is naturally linked to money. No problem, you can start designing. To ensure that it is convenient to carry, the functionality shouldn't be cheap. Understood, Master. The spider suit project has been established. Boom. 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 Inside Tony's lab, explosions resounded. After reading the experimental results, Yinsen pushed the glasses on the bridge of his nose. The lethality is very strong, but it must be controlled. No problem, it's just the recoil exhibited by the robotic arm alone. Tony carried a silver-white robotic arm in one hand, and the palm still had the residual warmth after burning. What he just tested was the function of the repulsor on the armor. The 15-mile area outside of Gulmra can only be described as a purgatory on Earth. The terrorist organization is occupying this place. The TV on the wall reports the news of Gulmra. Tony looks at the TV, several of the Ten Rings gang members flashed as the camera panned around. Tony recognized at a glance that it was the few people outside the cave before. Jarvis, how is the preparation for Mark III? Mark III, after the high-altitude flight, has been redesigned to improve all its shortcomings. It's ready, sir. Ready to equip. Okay. Let's go. Destroy things that shouldn't exist in this world. 5 minutes later, Tony changed into a black tights and stood on a platform. The platform under his feet slowly deformed. The several robotic arms extended and helped in equipping the Mark III armor. After the Mark III battle armor was equipped, Tony slowly flew up and asked a voice behind him, "What do you want to say to those chops?" Yinsen thought about it for a while, and said with a grim face, "Fuck them all up. Be sure to bring it." After speaking, Tony flew to Gulmra at full speed. This time he went both to destroy those weapons and to get revenge. Tony's whereabouts immediately caught the attention of Nick Fury, the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Has he built new armor so soon? Nick Fury looked at the screen, specifically, at Tony, who was flying at full speed, and was a little surprised. Maybe it's the power of money. Although Nick Fury has no clear understanding of Tony's assets, what he does know is that compared with Tony, S.H.I.E.L.D. is just too poor. And this battle armor, how can it become more and more like that mysterious golden mecha? This also made Nick Fury more and more convinced that Tony had something to do with the golden mecha. And the relationship is not small. No matter if Nick Fury wanted to break his head, he would never have thought that Tony made his armor like this. Just because when Tony saw the Emperor's armor for the first time, he thought the Emperor's armor was cool. Therefore, in the design of Mark's armor, it integrated the looks of Emperor's armor. Hill, where is Tony's route going? Hill roughly deduced Tony's direction and said, looking from the direction, he's heading where the TV news channels are reporting now, Gulmra. If I guessed correctly, he should have gone to the Ten Rings gang for revenge. I think the more important reason is that he wants to destroy the weapons that were sold by Obadiah through the black market. Nick Fury added, let's just wait and see. What's the news from the NYPD? They're getting ready to enter the sewers to check the lizardman's lair. Answered Hill. How about Spider-Woman? Have you found out who she is? Agent Hill replied, no. Another well-hidden fellow. Troublesome. Nick Fury couldn't help but scolded a few words in his heart. At this time, Gwen, who was in class, sneezed several times. I handed her the tissue. Are you all right? Did you catch a cold last night? Gwen took the tissue. Thanks, I think it was just a few sudden sneezes. No problem. She added. The intimacy of the two naturally caused the other men in the class to look at I with hostility in their eyes. Even the teacher who was in class coughed a few times, signaling the two to restrain themselves. Gwen blushed and sat up to continue listening to the class. At that moment, Gwen's phone screen lights up. A row of red prompt words appeared on it. Captain Stacy has led a team into the sewers to search for Connor's whereabouts. Gwen suddenly changed her face and looked at I. They're in class, so they have to figure out how to get out. Noticing the urgency on Gwen's face, I gave her a reassuring look, and then tapped gently on his phone. The next second, the get out of class bell rang. The atmosphere in the class, which had been dead, suddenly became lively. And the teacher in class also announced to get out of the class with a stunned face. Get out of class is over so soon today. Am I so forgetful in my lecture today? Get out of, home. Is it over already? I don't remember dozing off in my own lecture though. I took Gwen's hand and immediately ran out of the classroom. The other students in the class were stunned. The sun's still shining brightly outside, why are you guys in such a hurry? After leaving the campus, it didn't take long for Gwen to switch into her spider suit at a corner of a building and swing out. On the other hand, when I arrived at the library, he sat down on the side and opened his computer. After putting on the earphones, the Red Queen readily reported, "Master, Tony Stark has left New York and flew towards the Middle East." "Oh. Is there a video?" I suddenly became lively. After all, Tony's safety is now related to Stark Industries stock. That is directly related to II's future financial income. Yes, just this morning I deciphered the military satellite. I caught Tony. Although the picture quality is blurry, it has been optimized by me. A video immediately appeared on the computer screen. A white light cuts through the sky, with the optimization of the picture. The full picture of Iron Man Tony Stark's armor also appeared in front of I, but I couldn't help but twitch his mouth. This Iron Man. Has the style changed a bit? Immediately afterwards, I watched Tony's unilateral massacre of the Ten Rings gang from a condescending perspective. Among them, several people's lives were left to those refugees to deal with. It is foreseeable that the fate of these people will be very tragic. This also makes I appreciate one thing about Iron Man: he is very gentle to his own people. But never be soft on the enemy. Okay, look at Gwen's side. Queens, Gwen stops in a tree. This area has all been arranged for the police, especially every sewer. There are several police detectives. And the weapons they hold are not pistols, but lethal shotguns. Red Queen, is there any other place to enter the sewer? In the back alley to your right, there is a sewer behind an abandoned door. Very hidden, no police detectives guarding. After Gwen thanked her, she swung the spider webs away. At the same time, George and others in the sewer stopped at a corner. The scene in front of them made everyone stunned. Osborne Industries. In a laboratory, Peter was wearing a white coat and bowed his head in front of the experimental table. On the test bench, in addition to the gene regeneration potion, there are 5 purple potions. In addition, there is a purple potion in Peter's hands. In front of Peter was a rabbit. This rabbit has been injected with a regeneration gene. Even though Dr. Connor's laboratory was blocked, but it was not difficult to bring a rabbit out of it with the influence of Osborne Industries. And this purple potion is the antigen reagent that Peter reverse engineered from Connor's decay rate formula. As long as the lizard regeneration gene in the rabbit can be removed, then the lizard gene in Dr. Connor's can be removed. Please, let it be a success. While praying in his heart, Peter injected the rabbit with the antigen he had just developed. Not long after the injection, he saw that the rabbit began to tremble all over. Peter stared intently at the rabbit's reaction. His palms were sweating due to tension. He kept praying in his heart. Must succeed. Must succeed. After the rabbit in the cage trembled for a while, the regenerated part of the amputated limb visibly shriveled like a dead plant and began to decay. Immediately afterwards, it fell off like hair. Success. As long as there is this antidote, I will definitely make Dr. Connor's return to being human. Peter got up from his seat excitedly. Next, is to find a way to locate Connor's. My God, Peter. You really are a genius. Norman didn't expect that when he entered the laboratory, he could watch Peter's experiment succeed all the way. Even a conceited person like him couldn't help but praise him after watching Peter's experiment. From this moment on, Norman only began to look at Peter directly. Hearing Osborne's voice, Peter turned around to say hello. Uncle Norman, I'm sorry. I didn't even notice you were here. Norman waved his hand. It doesn't matter, I didn't have the heart to bother you because of your dedication to the experiment. I'm here to provide you with Connors information. Do you know where Dr. Connors is now? Peter asked excitedly. Now that the antigen reagent has been researched, as long as Dr. Connors is found, all problems will be solved. It's not just me, but detectives all over New York City now know his whereabouts. It's just that no one knows he's Connors. A bad premonition immediately rose in Peter's heart. What happened? Last night, several police detectives were attacked by Connors, and they were later rescued by Spider-Woman. This morning, New York City dispatched almost all the police detectives to block the large and small sewers in Queens. Answered Norman. Peter's heart suddenly trembled. The Queen. How are Uncle Ben and Aunt May? Peter asked worriedly. Norman pressed his hand and signaled Peter to calm down. Don't worry, they are all right. As of now, no one has been injured. That's good. If Dr. Connors hurts, or kills someone, there's no going back. Peter breathed a sigh of relief and continued, Uncle Norman, I'm going to find Dr. Connors. Then he turned around and put away the regeneration gene reagent on the desktop, as well as the antigen reagent that had just been developed. Thank you for lending me the laboratory, Uncle Norman. All the research reports are on the table. I'll leave it all to you. Norman nodded. I wish you good luck, child. If you can come back smoothly, remember to come back to me. I happen to have a very important scientific research project here. I believe that if you help me, we will surpass Howard. Peter frowned. Howard Stark. It would be an understatement to say that he was the first in the modern scientific world. Surpass him. What does Norman want to study? This also successfully aroused Peter's curiosity, but there are more important things to do now. Looking at the back of Peter leaving, Norman decided to send the alone Peter at the end. Wait a minute, Peter. Anything else? Uncle Ruoman. It'll be too long for you if you just walk like this. I'll take you there. I know an exact place that could get you to the sewers without being seen by those pesky detectives. 20 minutes later. In front of an abandoned delivery room. Norman parked the car at the factory gate. Not far from the gate, there is a small manhole cover. What's more, this place is not far from Queens at all. Why would he know about such a hidden place? Seeing the doubts on Peter's face, Norman explained, this is an abandoned factory building of Osborne Industries, and few people usually come here. You can't go down the manhole cover without a proper tool to pry it open. Go inside, open the door of the warehouse and there is a passage leading directly to the sewer. It was prepared to facilitate the placement of sewage pipes. Norman took out an old key. Peter took the key in Norman's hand, thanked him again, and then got out of the car and left. Seeing Peter walking towards the back of the abandoned factory building, Ruoman kept reminding, good luck, Peter. Hopefully, we can work together one day. The last sentence was much quieter. He also didn't know if Peter could hear it, but that didn't matter. Norman turned around and drove away. Inside the sewer, George and the others stood numbly at the corner, and what caught their eyes were the bones. There were also 2 bloody corpses at the side with flies flying around. A few police detectives with slightly poor psychological qualities even leaned against the wall and vomited. The old detective, who thought he had a little bit of experience, endured the discomfort and went to check it out. He came back and said, "Cap, it seems that some animal did it. The broken sections on the corpses are uneven, and the tissues on their bodies were torn off. And there are messy footprints at the scene, as well as tooth prints on the two corpses." George took a deep breath and said, "It seems that we are getting closer and closer to his nest. Everyone, be alert and observe the surroundings." The crowd continued to go deeper. Not long after they left, Gwen came over, dangling her web against the wall. With the Red Queen tracking the detective's radio signals, Gwen is hardly afraid of getting lost in this intricate underground labyrinth. When Gwen also came to the corner and saw the corpses lying around, she subconsciously clutched her mouth, feeling a sudden surge in her stomach. Gwen murmured softly, "Dr. Connors, you did all of this inside the school library?" Without any visual equipment inside the sewers, I could only rely on the floor plan of the sewers that Red Queen created. The different red dots on the floor plan represent everyone now in the sewers, collected by their own signaling devices. "Master, Peter Parker left Osborn Industries in Norman Osborn's car. Can you find out what Peter did at Osborn Industries during this time?" The Red Queen replied, "Yes, but it will take time. I thought for a while, check it out." When he thought of Norman, who was likely to become Gwen's enemy in the future, I had to be a little more cautious. "Understood, Master." After speaking, the Red Queen fell silent. I continued to pay attention to Gwen's movements. He prefers to train Gwen to become an excellent Spider-Woman behind the scenes rather than taking action against these villains himself. He prefers himself behind the scenes while training Gwen to become an excellent Spider-Woman rather than in the front lines against these villains. It's kind of like growing games. It's a little exciting to think about. In the sewers, the police team led by George has not found any trace of Connors. Gwen followed far behind. As he followed, she also put cobwebs on the sewer behind her and connected it to her hands. As long as there is an enemy behind her, she can immediately notice when they touch the spider web. On the other side, Peter started walking towards Queen's sewer area after he entered from the direction that Norman provided. Just after Peter had approached the Queen's location, on a damp platform somewhere in the sewer, there is actually a table that has all kinds of experimental instruments. Although it looks old, it is clearly functional. Lizard Connors tried these instruments, as if making something. In front of him, a small tower-shaped instrument was slowly taking shape. Suddenly, the Lizard Connors sniffed the air in front of him a few times. It seems that a few little bugs who are not afraid of death have come in. Lizard Connors put down the tool in his hand, crawled on the ground, and kept sniffing. "This is Peter. You're here too. I'll go to you as soon as I finish solving those little bugs." The corner of the Lizard Connors' long mouth tickled up strangely, as if he was smiling evilly. After confirming Peter's position, Connors the lizard jumped into the ditch on one side and swam quickly. "What is this?" Peter, who had entered the sewers of Queens, saw the same thing: white silk threads that covered the surrounding walls. He touched it very curiously. "Is this spider webs? How can there be such thick spider webs in the sewers, so huge that it can cover the walls?" Peter felt that the previous spider web seemed familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had seen it for a while. It was a while after Peter touched the spider web, and Gwen clearly felt the thread in her hand tremble. "Is there something behind?" Gwen looked back at once. "Miss Gwen, it's Peter Parker." "Peter? What is he doing here?" The Red Queen told Gwen carefully how Peter came here. If Peter comes in, Dr. Connors will definitely come for him. I'll rush over immediately. Miss Gwen, do you need me to inform Police Captain George and the others? No, they can't help. Thinking of what happened last night, Gwen was still a little unhappy. With George and his team's firepower, although not too practical to severely damage Connors, but if they encounter him, they still have a certain ability to protect themselves. After weighing the pros and cons, Gwen rushed to Peter's direction alone. In the library, looking at Gwen's red dot moving in the opposite direction, I immediately guessed what Gwen wanted to do. I tapped the table with his fingertips, as if thinking about something. After a while, the Red Queen's voice sounded, "Master, after Peter Parker and Norman Osborn met, Norman provided Peter Parker with a private laboratory. During that period, Norman Osborn used the convenience of Osborn Industries to retrieve a rabbit in Connors' laboratory for Peter Parker." Rabbit. That's right, a rabbit injected with a regenerative gene drug. I understood that Peter had already developed a potion that could turn Connors the lizard back into a human. That's why he went to the sewer alone. He wanted to use himself as bait to attract Connors the lizard, and then inject him with medicine. Queen, tell Gwen about this. Okay, Master. There is one more situation, Master. I's eyes narrowed. What's wrong? While I was investigating data and decisions within Osborn Industries, it was discovered that someone else had broken into their network. Do you know who it is? I followed their traces and found that it was SHIELD. SHIELD. Are they going to intervene too? Inside S.H.I.E.L.D. Nick Fury watched what happened in Gulmra. Tony destroyed all Stark Industries weapons. By the way, he also eradicated the local Ten-Ring gang over and over again. Later, in the process of leaving, he also accidentally destroyed an F-22 fighter jet of the military. What a troublemaker. Nick Fury said flatly. Judging from Tony's current performance, he has listed Tony as a member of the Avengers plan. Now it's time to find a time, contact Tony directly, and then coax him in, and it's done. At this time, Hill walked over from behind Nick Fury. The New York Police Department has begun to arrest that lizard monster. Where's Spider-Woman? Agent Hill shook her head. I don't know her location now. Nick Fury took a light sip of the coffee in his hand. I think she should be in the sewers with the NYPD now. Without explaining his speculation too much, Nick Fury continued to ask, any other news? There is none left. Nick Fury nodded. I'm in such a good mood. The Avengers project that has never progressed before, has now found 3 candidates. Tony, the mysterious Spider-Woman. And the super physicist who is now on the run. Dr. Bruce Banner. Inside the sewer, George led the men behind him and walked slowly. George, who was walking in front, raised his hand and made a pause gesture, and all the people behind him stayed where they were. George pressed his radio headset. Chief, there is a piece of information from Group B to report to you. Say. Peter Parker left Osborn Industries using Norman Osborn's car and was brought to an abandoned factory. People from Group B went in and found that Peter Parker is also in the sewer now. After hearing the news, George looked behind him sharply. Where did he come in what direction? You're back. Damn. George scolded in a low voice, and then said to the 2 people beside him, you 2, take a few of them and continue to search forward. You guys, come back with me. Contact as soon as there is a situation. After what happened last night, George knew very well that the lizard monster's purpose was Peter Parker. Now Peter Parker is in the sewers, whatever his purpose is, lizard monsters will go to Peter Parker first. George quickly divided into two groups, and led a group to Peter's direction quickly. After trotting all the way, George found a lot of spider web on the wall. George's face was gloomy, Spider-Woman. But he didn't stop to check too much, at least for now, Spider-Woman was a reliable ally. George can still handle this. I, who was watching the overall situation, watched George run in the direction of Gwen. Could not help frowning. According to the original character's fate, George died at the hands of Dr. Connors the Lizard. It seems necessary to go there in person. He concluded. He didn't want to see Gwen sinking into confusion and self-blame, inside the sewer. Peter didn't walk too fast, he walked slowly as if he was on an outing. He knew that as long as he was here, Connors the Lizard's keen sense of smell would spot him right away. And all he has to do is wait. Wait until the lizard Connors appears in front of him. Because he carries something that lizard Connors desperately needs. Suddenly, Peter heard the sound of rushing water not far away, and the sound seemed to be approaching him. Peter followed the sound and looked over, and the originally calm water was now gushing from the bottom. Through the water, there is a faint shadow. And that black shadow is getting bigger. Peter's pupils shrank, something was about to come out of the water. Without thinking too much, Peter clung to the backpack in his arms and ran back in the direction he came from. Just as he turned around, not even running a few steps, heard a bang sound behind him. With a splash, lizard Connors sprang out of the water like a fish and landed in front of Peter. "Hey, Peter. Did you finally come back with my stuff and give it back to me?" Peter took a few steps back subconsciously, while reaching into his backpack with one hand. Holding the antigen drug that was just developed, he said, "That's Dr. Connors' thing, you are not Dr. Connors. You're a monster." Lizard Connors laughed, "No, Peter. I just found a more correct evolutionary direction, you just don't understand me now. As long as you reach the same height as me, you will understand. Only by becoming, this pointing at himself, he continued, is the most correct destination for us weak human beings. Come on, Peter. Give me something. Come with me and join the glorious evolution." Lizard Connors opened his claws and grabbed at Peter. Just when the hand of Lizard Connors was about to approach him, Peter's eyes became sharp, and he took out a tube of antigen reagent from the bag and stabbed it towards the attacking claws. But the Lizard Connors reacted faster and grabbed Peter's wrist with a backhand. He lifted Peter up. He glanced suspiciously at the purple potion in Peter's hand. "Peter, although I don't know what you're doing, but I can feel that this thing is very dangerous for me now." The other hand grabbed the antigen reagent from Peter's hand and crushed it in the palm of his hand. "Let me guess, to lure me out. You must have my stuff, and it's in your bag." Lizard Connors grabbed Peter's bag as poor Peter wanted to protect it, but his strength was not really that worthy in front of the Lizard Connors. His resistance is tantamount to stopping the car with an arm. "Don't worry, Peter. You are my most proud student, so you will be the second human being to join the glorious evolution besides me." Just when the Lizard Connors was about to tear open the backpack with his mouth, a white spider web stuck to the backpack and Peter's back. Then, with a pull, the backpack and Peter were pulled away from Connor's palm. Looking at the sudden intrusion, Lizard Connor's eyes blazed as he looked forward. "Spider-Woman, it's you again." Gwen, who caught Peter and the backpack, laughed and joked, "Oh, I didn't know I'm that popular already. Even the lizard monsters in the sewers know I'm Spider-Woman." "What? Want an autograph?" "But sorry, Spider-Woman's signature hasn't been designed yet." Gwen's continuous talk made Connors the lizard even more annoyed. He directed himself towards Gwen and rushed over. Even at this moment, I, who had just arrived in Queens and hid himself, had a strange expression on his face. It is the famous talk shit of Spider-Man. Or in this case, Spider-Woman. Is this actually their hidden ability? Hey, find a place to hide yourself. Looking at the rushing lizard Connors, Gwen reminded Peter behind him. At the same time, he threw the backpack out and gave it back to Peter. Peter took the backpack, took out a tube of antigenes and threw it at Gwen. "Smack this on him. It works," he added. Gwen took the antigene potion. "No problem, genius." Seeing Gwen holding the threatening purple potion in her hand, Lizard Connors immediately became cautious. When fighting with Gwen, he kept his distance from Gwen while thinking about countermeasures. The sound of the two fighting was particularly clear in places like the sewers. George, who really came here, immediately understood that Spider-Woman had already clashed with the Lizardman. "Everyone, ready your weapons. Aim only at the lizard monster and don't hurt Spider-Woman." They had a variety of different weapons on their hands. There are shotguns, there are lightsabers, and 2 flamethrowers. George just put on all the weapons that could be used in the sewers. If this is on the ground, it is estimated that George wants to apply for a bazooka on it, and give the lizardman a shot. Soon, everyone saw the battle between the lizardman and Spider-Woman. George immediately said, "Spider-Woman, get out of the way." George roared. Gwen looked at George immediately. 2 detectives, including George, held 2 shotguns. "Hey, if you get hit by that thing, you won't feel bad at all." Gwen pulled the web in her hand and jumped away immediately. Seeing Spider-Woman who jumped out of the way, he didn't hesitate to pull the trigger. The strong sound of shotguns is especially harsh in the environment of sewers. Lizard Connors immediately protected the position of his head and heart. Only these 2 places cannot be regenerated. The bullets of the 2 shotguns instantly left the body of Lizard Connors full of holes and blood spattered. The arm was also broken. But it soon grew back. Peter in the back looked a little worried about Connors. In order to protect Connors, he naturally wouldn't tell the others about his weakness. "It's useless, Sergeant George. No matter what damage is done, he'll regenerate." George looked at Peter and smiled proudly. "Really? If we can't kill him, then bake him." The shotguns were emptied quickly. But don't forget, George also brought a flamethrower. 2 detectives with flamethrowers behind them immediately switched with George's position. And 2 groups of flames shot out of the muzzle. The intense heat scorched the skin of Connors the lizard. Raw. No matter how strong the regenerative ability of Lizard Connors, under such burning, he couldn't help but cry out in pain. Protecting his head and heart, he jumped into the water. George and the others on the shore lost their target immediately. "Back up and lean against the wall. Don't stay on the shore." George's rich experience is particularly important at this time, and everyone sticks to the wall according to George's instructions. Staring at the movement of the water. "Peter, it's about time. Are you still telling the truth?" George's tone was light, but full of deterrence. Peter next to Gwen trembled, and then said, "He's a failure of the experiment, but this time I've brought medicines that can restore him." Although Peter didn't say who it was, George also guessed 6 out of 9 its real identity. Just need an answer from Peter. Obviously, Peter would not tell him the truth easily. Knowing that Peter wanted to defend Dr. Connors, Gwen immediately made a peace sign and said, "Now that the monster is gone, what are we going to do next?" George glanced at her and said, "He's still underwater, and his target is Peter. Or Peter has what he wants." At the same time, he looked at Peter's backpack. Gwen raised the antigen potion in her hand. "Maybe we should figure out a way to hit him with this thing. Is that the medicine that can turn him back?" "Yes, you might have just succeeded in getting him back." There was a hint of reproach in Gwen's tone. "Spider-Woman, you figured it out. It's not a superhero game right now. Just like you just now, I was almost eaten by him," he said. Gwen was instantly unhappy. "What? Are you kidding? When I finish dealing with him, I will arrest you next." "Not to be outdone, Gwen, really, then see if you have the ability." Just when the two were not letting anyone else, one of the detectives immediately said, "Head, there is something under the water." George immediately raised his gun and stared at the water. On the water, a huge vortex is slowly taking shape. The water flow also became turbulent because of the appearance of the whirlpool. After George observed for a bit, his face changed. "He's coming out, be careful." Before he could finish speaking, everyone heard a bulging sound. The water splashed more than a meter high, covering everyone's sight. And behind the raised splash, came Lizard Connor's voice. He first targeted the 2 detectives who carried the flamethrowers as they were the slowest. Besides, the damage dealt by them was the worst. Even if he has recovered, there are still burnt marks left by those 2 weapons. Lizard Connors moved extremely fast, taking advantage of the splash of water to block everyone's sight. He landed on the ground and shot directly at the 2 with the flamethrower. The sharp claws swung towards the 2 of them like sharp blades. If they are caught, it is estimated that they can be directly dismembered. "Be careful." Gwen was the first to react, and the spider web in his hand stuck to the 2 people and dragged them over. But the flamethrower in their hands fell to the ground. Lizard Connors gave Gwen a stern look. "Well done, Spider-Woman." Both mocking and complimenting. Then the 2 flamethrowers were destroyed and smashed. Now, his purpose has been achieved. There are no weapons here to deal with him. The drenched George saw the flamethrowers destroyed as soon as he regained his senses. But luckily the 2 of them were fine. Without the suppression of the flamethrower, they posed no real threat to the Lizard Connors at all. George complained to Spider-Woman, "If I were you, I would have saved 1 more flamethrower just now." Gwen was not happy when she heard it, and retorted, "I only have 2 hands, and I can only save 2. And my choice is 2 people. Aren't you a Spider-Woman? Why don't you have 8 hands?" "Gwen, I'm Spider-Woman, not Spider-Monster." "It's the same for me," George said. "What's the matter, is there any internal discord?" mocked Connors. "Don't worry, I won't let you die here. I'll let you, like Peter, enjoy the first glorious evolution." Lizard Connors looked at the 2 quarreling, and said with a hint of ridicule in his words, "Humans are not fully evolved, so they quarrel so much for a little difference of opinion. Even fighting, even killing, and finally even war. And I was chosen by the gods, leading mankind to great unity and great evolution of peace." The mind of Lizard Connors has become distorted under the influence of regeneration genes. It perfectly inherits the group-based characteristics of ancient lizards. "Shut up," You ugly reptile. Gwen couldn't get mad at George, and was already holding her breath. As a girl, she was actually called a spider monster by her father. What's more annoying is that Gwen can't beat him. But I can't beat my own father, so I'll just beat Connors instead. Gwen returned the antigen drug in her hand to Peter. I'll beat him to the ground, you come and inject him. After she finished speaking, she rushed towards Lizard Connors. Lizard Connors saw Spider-Woman running, bloody red light flashing in her eyes. The claws swung down towards Gwen. But the next scene made Lizard Connors dumbfounded. Spider-Woman caught his paw with ease. To know how his claws are, it has no problem directly chopping granites. Immediately after, Gwen did a backflip to his chin, and the Lizard Connors fell directly backwards. But it wasn't over. Gwen grabbed the tail of the Lizard Connors and headed in the other direction for a tumble. This scene made everyone else present dumbfounded. Several police detectives subconsciously took a few steps away from George, as if to draw a line. George also swallowed, thankful he didn't say too much just now. Under the astonished eyes of the crowd, Lizard Connors was beaten unilaterally by Spider-Woman, and he had little power to fight back. Every time he fights back, he will be caught by Gwen, and then fall heavily over a shoulder throw. Strong regeneration ability does not mean that the Lizard Connors were resistant to beatings. Soon, the Lizard Connors was spread out on the ground. Lost mobility. Gwen clapped her hand, more than half of her anger was gone. If there were not too many people here, she would have taken off her hood and took a deep breath. Seeing Peter's dazed look, she said, "Peter, I'll leave the rest to you." "Ah. Oh. Peter came back to his senses and walked over with his backpack. Holding up the antigen potion in his hand, he gave George and the others a complicated look. In the end, he plunged it into Lizard Connors' body. George and the others also put away their guns and walked over slowly. Seeing George coming over, Gwen said proudly, "As I said, I can solve it by myself even if you didn't come." How could George dare retort her words? If this will piss her off later. He dare not think about it more. He could only nod in silence. With the injection of the antigen agent, the scales on the surface of Lizard Connors began to wither and fall off. Connors also slowly recovered his human form. Even the right hand that had regrown was also corrupted at the moment and turned into a pool of dead skin. Connors, who returned to his human form, was in a trance. Looking at Peter in front of him, he said vaguely, "Peter." "Yes, it's me. Dr. Connors. You've recovered." Tears began to flow from Peter's excited eyes. Looking at Peter's appearance, Dr. Connors seemed to remember what he had done during this time. The whole person also fell into annoyance, and immediately asked Peter, "Peter, where is the last potion?" Here. Peter took out the last tube of regeneration gene medicine from his backpack and handed it to Dr. Connors. "Peter, let's destroy it." "But, Dr. Connors, this is your..." Looking at the joy of their reunion, Gwen was about to leave when the spider sensing alarm bell rang loudly. "No, Peter. Get it back." When George and the others were still confused, Connors, who was in Peter's arms, suddenly smiled evilly. He squeezed the regeneration gene potion in his hand and snatched the backpack from Peter. Then he pushed Peter hard into the water. George immediately stepped back and raised the pistol. "Kurt Connors. Put down what you have in your hand immediately. I warn you." "Certainly." Dr. Connors slammed the backpack in his hand towards the wall, and the sound of glass bursting came from the backpack. Seeing this scene, Peter, who got up from the water, cried out in disbelief, "No!" But it was too late, and the purple medicinal liquid oozed out of the backpack after hitting the ground. It proved that the antigen reagent inside has been smashed. "Dr. Connors, why?" Peter looked at Connors in confusion. The Connors in his memory was not like this. Gwen walked over and pulled Peter out of the water, explaining, "It didn't have enough time for the potion work, although his body is recovering. But his affected mind still couldn't recover in a short time." Peter also hammered the ground in irritation. "Kurt Connors. One last warning, put your things down or we'll shoot." However, in the next second, Connor's actions made everyone dumbfounded. Connor's free hand was inserted directly into his abdomen, and his face showed an extremely painful expression. Immediately afterwards, he took out a cylindrical instrument from his abdomen. "Peter, what is that?" Peter, with red eyes, raised his head to look at Connors with difficulty. When he saw the instrument that Connors took out of his body, his face changed suddenly. "Stop him! That's an atomizer!" Peter got up straight from the ground and ran in the direction of Connors. Atomizer! George and the others didn't know what it was. But Gwen, who had heard Peter's explanation, was very clear that it was an instrument that could atomize genetic reagents. Once the genetic reagent is atomized, the person who inhales it will become a monster like Connors the lizard. Gwen, who had no time to explain, shot out the spider web in her hand, targeting the atomizer in Dr. Connors' hand. This lunatic. For his own ethnic plan, he actually hid the atomizer in his body. He had long thought that if grabbing the genetic medicine from Peter's hand was hindered, he would atomize the genetic medicine as soon as possible. Gwen moved fast, but Connors moved even faster. The genetic medicine in his hand had already been inserted into the atomization device, and Gwen's face changed when she saw this scene. Raising her other hand, she shot out another spider web, and glued it to George, who was relatively close by. With a sharp pull, George flew back in Gwen's direction. As he was on the way towards her, he also bumped into Peter, who was running forward. Just as George was pulled back, a thick green smoke instantly engulfed the other detectives and Connors. George and Peter got up from the ground. In the thick fog, there are several black figures that could be clearly seen. Then those figures suddenly moved in their location. The first one to walk out of the thick fog was Connors, who had changed back into the lizard. And behind him are several infected police detectives who had also turned into lizardmen. It's just that, compared to Lizard Connors, their sizes were a little smaller. Looking at the scene in front of her, Gwen did not forget to say a sentence, "Oh. This situation is really bad right now." She turned to look at Peter, and said, "Peter, cheer up. We need your help now. Deal with them, deal with them." At this time, the remaining police detectives behind the three also rushed over. Several of them were also quite frightened by the scene in front of them. There used to be only one lizard monster, but now there are 6. And several of them can be seen from the broken clothes. They are their colleagues. "Head, what happened?" a detective asked immediately. George snatched the shotgun from his hand. "Don't worry about what's going on, get ready to shoot." Peter looked around and suddenly fixed his eyes on his backpack. He perceived something wrong. "Spider-Woman, get that backpack for me," he said. Gwen didn't waste any time, she immediately shot a web and pulled the bag. Catching the bag that was full of medical liquid inside, she dropped it in front of Peter. Peter hurriedly unpacked. A look of joy surfaced on his face. Peter reached into his backpack. His hands were covered in purple potion. But the next moment, 2 tubes of intact antigene medicine were taken out of it. Gwen said happily after seeing it, "How do you know there are still some intact? The amount of outflow is too small. There are 4 antigen potions in total. So if they are all broken, there should be more liquid oozing out." That's when I guessed there could be some that are not broken. Gwen couldn't help but exclaim, "You're a genius." When Lizard Connors heard this, he was terrified. Peter glanced at Gwen and smiled, "Thank you. You too. Don't really want to interrupt your mutual praises, but the current situation doesn't seem to be friendly for us." George poured cold water on them. Gwen frowned as she looked at the 6 lizard monsters slowly approaching in front of her. Holding them back is not a problem. But the problem is that there is a waterway next to it. If they can't fight, they will just jump into the water and escape. It will be even harder to find them in the future. If I was here, how will he solve it? At this time, I, who had come to Queens a long time ago, has also been paying attention to the development in the sewers. After Connors turned back to being human, he tricked Peter into giving him the genetic medicine and infected the 5 police detectives using the atomizer device. Seeing the situation, I knew that he had to make a move now. I really don't want to go to that dirty and smelly place, but I can't help it. I want you to make up for me tonight, Gwen. I smiled, then his figure flashed and disappeared. Inside the sewer. After George weighed the pros and cons, he said, "There's no way out. Now count how many we can save. Spider-Woman, we'll hold them down. As soon as you have the chance, get that atomizer. Peter, you get ready to use the antigen potion." George got all the work in order right away. Gwen also knew that now is not the time to get angry with George, so she also obeyed George's arrangements. George and the others stepped forward. Shotguns, flamethrowers and other available firearms are fired together. The 2 lizardmen stepped forward, blocking most of the firepower to cover Connor's advance. The 2 lizardmen at the back jumped into the water. A large splash of water splashed from the water and rushed towards George and the others. Gwen jumped up and kicked the 2 lizardmen directly to the opposite bank. Connors, surrounded by a group of lizardmen, ordered, "The others are not important, as long as Peter is killed. No one can develop the kind of medicine that can destroy our tribe." With 2 lizardmen as meat shields, Connors jumped up after seeing the distance. He rushed towards several police detectives. But Gwen intercepted and kicked Lizard Connors away again. Lizard Connors slowly climbed up from the ground and looked at Peter, who was being protected by everyone at the back, with cold eyes. He also knows that they are targeting nebulizers. Now the nebulizer has stopped running, and the genetic medicine has been released. Lizard Connors walked over to the atomizer. Raising his feet, he looked at George and the others with a sneer. "For me, without it, I can just make another one. But for you, if it's gone, then it will be a complete despair." "No." Gwen, who was attached to the wall at this time, shot a spider web towards the atomizer, hoping that it would reach in time. When Connor's foot was about to fall, the entire sewer suddenly froze. The splashing water also stopped in midair. I, wearing the Emperor's armor, slowly walked out from behind Lizard Connors. Walking to Connors, he picked up the atomizer on the ground. Then walked towards Peter. He stopped when he passed Gwen and looked closely at Gwen's spider suit. Red Queen, after this, the mask of the new spider suit must have a filtering function, and the launch speed of the spider web launcher must be accelerated. Okay, Master. After observing for a while, I added another point. Also, install a small scanning drone, make it look like a small spider. Include these points in the spider suit project. That's all for now. After I gave out some instructions, he walked in front of Peter and placed the atomizing device in his hand in front of him. Asterisk snap asterisk. I snapped his fingers, and time resumed its flow again. Lizard Connors stepped on with one foot, and Gwen's spider web hadn't arrived yet. Just when Gwen was about to blame herself for not getting the atomizer, she found that below Lizard Connors' feet, the atomizer was gone. Lizard Connors also noticed that something didn't feel right under his feet. Just as he was about to check it out, his yellow vertical pupils suddenly shrank. Because he saw one in the crowd on the opposite side, the last existence he wanted to meet. An existence that left a permanent psychological shadow on him. Emperor. When and where did he appear? It was also at this time that Gwen and others discovered the uninvited guest among them. Who are you? George was the first to react, raising the shotgun in his hand, aiming it at I. At this moment, he only felt a chill on his back. Such a big person suddenly appeared among them, but no one noticed. Could it be that if he made a move just now, everyone here would have died? I's appearance broke the bottom line of Lizard Connor's psychology. At the beginning, he was confident that with the 6 of them, he could kill them all, including Peter and Spider-Woman. Destroy them. But since I appeared, everything has changed. He still remembered that night, the scene where he was crippled with just one punch. Run away immediately. And let the other lizardmen hold back the Emperor and escape. Under the influence of his survival instinct, what group consciousness, what group plan? That's all shit. Looking at George, who was waiting for him, I smiled lightly. Don't worry, I'm on your side. The atomizing device has already been handed to you, he said, pointing his hand. Following the direction I pointed, other people noticed the atomizing device was in Peter's hand. Even Peter was stunned. When did it appear here? But it doesn't matter anymore. Peter fiddled at once. George also understood that this man was here to help them. He immediately ordered the people behind him, hold them down with all your strength, and Peter will be ready in no time. I patted George on the shoulder. Don't waste your bullets, let me do it. Under the astonished eyes of everyone, I raised his right hand. Aurora sword. An orange-gold energy shield appeared in the void, and I drew a golden sword from it. George looked at Spider-Woman suspiciously. Is this your friend? Gwen shook her head, indicating that she didn't know him either. But he's so handsome. You guys, stop him quickly. Lizard Connors was completely panicked, and all the previous calmness he had disappeared without a trace at this moment. Naturally, the other 5 lizardmen did not know the fear of Lizard Connors this time. They just obeyed his orders and flew towards I looked at the 5 lizardmen who rushed over. He immediately understood what Lizard Connors was thinking at this time. Lizard Connors wanted his 5 brethren to hold him back so he could take the opportunity to escape. New York City's sewers are like a maze. Once the Lizard Connors jumped into the water and escapes, it will not be that easy to find him again. Since I was going to do it, he wouldn't give Lizard Connors any chance to escape. Facing the 5 lizardmen rushing towards him and Lizard Connors behind them who was about to jump into the water, I sneered and exclaimed, "Want to escape?" He waved the Aurora sword in his hand. The other hand pressed against the yin-yang design on the 5 elements belt and soft blue energy burst out from it instantly. It then attached to the Aurora sword in Ai's hand. Ai held the Aurora sword and made a thrusting motion towards the 5 lizardmen who were about to pounce on him. At the same time, a cold wind blew around his body. It slowly morphed around him, turning into prismatic thorns. Gwen, George and the others were stunned by this amazing spectacle. They had never seen such miraculous power. Lizard Connors only felt as if he was locked by something, and now he only had one thought in his mind. Escape. Must run away now. If you don't run away, you will really die here. Without further waiting for the opportunity, the Lizard Connors jumped violently towards the water next to him. How could I give him another chance to escape, Emperor? Piercing the wind. The Aurora sword in his hand stabbed violently towards the space in front of him, and all the wind thorns around him also stabbed towards all the lizardmen in front of him like raindrops. Show, show, show. With the sound of breaking wind, what followed was the screams of the lizardmen. The Lizard Connors, who was still jumping into the water, was shot down in midair and pinned to the ground. When everyone comes back to their senses, the 6 lizardmen, including Lizard Connors, were all pinned to the ground at this time. They couldn't do anything but moan in pain. This means that I held back his strength, otherwise this group of lizardmen would have been turned into a sieve at this moment. Under the strangulation of the power of the wind, he was afraid that there would be no residue left in the end. Peter's reaction was also quick. After seeing all the lizardmen nailed to the ground, he threw out the atomizing device that had been prepared in his hand. The atomizing device landed in the middle of the lizardmen and a thick purple mist spread instantly. Connors and the others in the dense fog slowly changed back to human form under the effect of the antigen medicine. Cough, cough, cough. George immediately arranged the remaining staff and began to deal with the next aftermath. Then he came to Ai's side and reached out to shake his hand. Thank you for your help. I only have one request. George frowned. Say it, sir. No matter how you write your next report, just don't include me in it. George nodded. A very reasonable request, not difficult, no problem. The people here are all my people. They're absolutely trustworthy. It's just. George glanced briefly at Spider-Woman, who was stuck to the wall. Gwen also felt George's eyes and came down from the wall and pointed at George's nose. Do you think I will speak out? Thinking of the tragic situation of Lizard Connors just now, George looked at Ai very slyly. I'll deal with the aftermath first. Looking at the back of George leaving, Gwen waved a small fist. I couldn't help but smile because of her tantrum. Hey, I still don't know your name. I'm Spider-Woman. Gwen introduced herself. The Emperor. Oh, cool name. As soon as Gwen finished speaking, she found that the Emperor who was in front of her had just now disappeared. How did he do it? Is it the ability of a chameleon? Gwen's guess caused Ai, who had just returned home, to cough a few times violently. What chameleon ability? Next, Connor's follow-up processing is all the matter of the New York Police Department. And even Peter was also brought back by George. That is, on the way to the police station, Peter also learned about the bones in the sewers. In the end, Connors was arrested, jailed and was now awaiting final judgment. Nick Fury in SHIELD also received the latest news. The lizardmen created by regeneration genes are a bit interesting. Hill, who has been by Nick Fury's side, asked, do you want to include him in the Avengers plan? Nick Fury said lightly, no need, just an ordinary person who has lost the ability to mutate. Also missing an arm, completely useless. I care about him just because of this. Nick Fury pointed to the scar on his face. The meaning is obvious, he just wants revenge. Hill didn't ask any further questions and continued to investigate the traces of the other three. Nick Fury continued to stand on the high platform, watching the SHIELD in operation below. He really likes the overall sense of the overall situation. It was as if everything was firmly in his hands. What he didn't notice was that under the platform he was standing on, a SHIELD agent was holding a tablet in his hand. A video is playing on the tablet. The video is divided into two sides. One side is a picture of Peter being interrogated at the police station. On the other side was Kurt Connors, who was tied to the bed with a face full of regret. After the agent saw it, he operated it a few times and then directly sent the video. And these are all things that Nick Fury, who is standing on the platform, didn't know at all. He was paying attention to another person. Tony just returned to New York from his trip to the Middle East. Tony flew back to his home and stood on the battle armor console. When Yinsen saw Tony coming back, he immediately stepped forward and pushed his glasses to observe the armor himself. It seems to have a good hardness. Tony waved his eyes. Indeed, otherwise I wouldn't be bombarded from the sky by a tank and walk out fine. It's just a little troublesome to take it off now. The robotic arm operated by Jarvis is helping Tony take off his armor. However, because some places have been deformed, the detachment of the battle armor is not working smoothly. Sir, please don't move. This will make it easier for me to operate if you stay stationary. Jarvis, I remember my designs were easy to put on and take off. Did you do something? It's not me, sir. Yinsen didn't care to see the master and servant bickering, so he simply went to do other things. For example, help Tony make a glass of green leaf juice to relieve the palladium poisoning in his body. This is also a secret that only he, Tony, and Jarvis know at the moment. It can be taken off for sure. Don't move, sir. As soon as Yinsen left, Little Pepper walked downstairs with the documents. Looking at Tony in surprise, what's going on? Seeing Little Pepper coming, Tony subconsciously felt a little guilty, and after thinking for a while, he said, "Don't make a fuss, it's not like you haven't seen me when I was more embarrassed." Pepper carefully observed for a while. What she really cared about was not what Tony was wearing, or what he was doing, but those hideous bullet holes on the armor. Are those bullet holes? Little Pepper's voice trembled a little. Tony was silent. Potts, do you mind if I take off this armor first and explain to you later? Okay, I'll wait for you. Little Pepper suppressed her tears, turned her head and walked upstairs. At the same time, the matter of Gulmra was reported for the first time. Rhodes also immediately held a press conference, claiming that the crash of the F-22 fighter jet was purely for technical reasons. The matter of Gulmra has nothing to do with the country of America at all. America never interferes in the affairs of other countries. This is their consistent aim. Obadiah watched the reporter's report on Gulmra on TV. He frowned, not knowing what he was thinking. After a while, he picked up the phone and said, "Kingpin, are you interested in accompanying me to the Ten Rings gang?" Kingpin on the other end of the phone was soaking in the hot spring, enjoying the cleaning service of these girls. "Oh. They have suffered heavy losses now, aren't you afraid that the two of us will go over and be held hostage by them? That's why I want you to come with me." Obadiah said with a smile, 2 days ago, their heads called me. They said they found a few blueprints made by Tony. Also, the parts of Makar scattered in the desert. If my guess isn't wrong, it's Tony who abolished the Ten Rings gang in Gulmra today. That suit should be the latest weapon developed by Tony. Having said this, Kingpin immediately became interested. Then what do you want to do? I don't want to do anything, but Tony's blueprint is of course my Stark Industries stuff. I just want to take back what should belong to our company. Obadiah explained. Hearing this, Kingpin showed his big white teeth and said, "Sometimes, I even think you are more suitable than me to be the boss of this gang." "Thank you for the compliment," replied Obadiah. "When to set off?" "Now." RAI's house. After an afternoon of tossing around in the sewers, Gwen felt a strange smell all over her. Back at RAI's side, she simply went to take a shower. Before, in order to facilitate the replacement of the spider outfit on RAI's house, she had already bought a lot of personal necessities and put them in RAI's house. To this end, RAI also prepared a room for Gwen to use. Currently, RAI was on the balcony drinking some tea. After some time, the sound of running water reverberated from the room. Hearing it, RAI was a little flustered. After all, he was now also a young man with a lot of explosive vigor and hormones. "Woman, it takes so long to take a bath." Voice, still so loud. "Isn't this torture? Women really takes bath quite longer than usual." RAI thought about it and decided to go downstairs and buy some things. When he was about to get up and go downstairs, a prompt sounded in his mind started, "Frog Cub has sent travel photos back, want to have look?" The Frog Cub sent a special travel product back, "Please take a look." "Oh. This stupid boy finally thinks of me," RAI said in his heart. He opened the game. Click on the photo sent by the Frog Cub. RAI focused his mind and opened the game. Compared with the travel specialty, RAI was even more curious about which world the Frog Cub traveled to. With the appearance of the photo, RAI's eyes suddenly became strange. "This is Pikachu." In the photo sent by the Frog Cub, he was happily posing with a yellow-colored rat. And behind the two of them, there is a young man wearing a peaked cap. Obviously the protagonist of the anime series Pokémon, the strange man among strange men. Ash Ketchum. The world of Pokémon, what kind of travel specials will there be? RAI curiously clicked on the travel specialties sent by the Frog Cub. The moment he opened it, RAI knew that this stupid frog was not raised in vain. No more suffering. Pokémon eggs, special products from the Pokémon world, which can hatch Pokémons. Note, any Pokémon is possible, random. Subsidiary product, Pokémon Ball, a special item in which a special Pokémon can be included. When you come back, I will definitely make you stronger. RAI silently gave the Frog Cub a thumbs up. Especially the information in the remarks. Wouldn't it be great if this hatched out a legendary level Pokémon? But, now there's one more problem. System, how do I hatch this Pokémon's egg? Extracting, it will enter the incubation period immediately after it is extracted, and it will hatch automatically after 3 days. The egg will be bound to the host after it hatches, and immediately recognizing the host with 100% loyalty. Hearing this, RAI got up and walked back to his room, spread a blanket on the floor, took out the Pokémon egg from the travel souvenir and put it down lightly. Then lightly patted the egg's body. Be competitive, hatch into a strong Pokémon. He was already looking forward to what kind of strange Pokémon would hatch from this egg in 3 days. Sometimes, the unknown is precisely the most attractive thing. At this time, the sound of running water outside the door had stopped. Gwen came out in a thin white shirt. And this shirt actually belongs to Ai. Because Gwen didn't put any extra clothes in Ai's place, the spider suit and other clothes were already washed in Ai's washing machine. After washing it and putting it in the dryer, Gwen could wear it back. So Gwen, who had just taken a shower, could only borrow a shirt from Ai. Ai's shirt was draped over Gwen's body, making it look baggy, but it also revealed a laid-back beauty. Plus, with the slightly wet hair, there were also the long legs with some water droplets in it. All of these showed another kind of beauty of Gwen. Ai, who was walking out of the room, seeing Gwen like this, he couldn't help but walk up and hugged Gwen. "Have you washed it?" Gwen also embraced Ai as it naturally came, and hummed softly. The two looked at each other and kissed naturally. After a while, Gwen sat on Ai's lap and told Ai how dangerous the big battle in the sewers was today. If it wasn't for Emperor, who suddenly showed up at the end, the consequences would be unimaginable. "What do you think of that Emperor?" Gwen thought about it and said, "He very strong, but it seems like..." "Like what?" "It's like a mutant with chameleon abilities. He disappears with a single click, so he might be invisible." Cough cough cough. In one sentence, Ai choked up and coughed. "What chameleon? No. She must be taught a good lesson. Asterisk slap, asterisk." Ai smacked Gwen's ass and the sharp sound made Gwen's cheeks flush. The roots of her neck were red as if he could pinch blood. After playing, Ai also realized that something was wrong. Gwen didn't know that he was the Emperor, and there was nothing wrong with making that judgment, looking at Gwen, whose face was beet red. I didn't know how to explain it for a moment. Why are you spanking my ass?" Gwen covered the place I had hit with one hand, and although it didn't hurt, she felt an indescribably strange feeling. Ai's eyes rolled. "Gwen, have you heard of the mysterious smack massage?" Gwen was stunned. "What is that?" I nodded. "Very good. The next thing is to teach it to her directly." I picked up Gwen and said, "Let's go to my room, and I will let you experience it yourself." As soon as she heard that they were going to Ai's room, Gwen's face became even redder. Her whole body was like an octopus, wrapped around Ai's body, and her red face was buried in Ai's shoulders. Ai, looking at Gwen's appearance, was quite happy in his heart. "You are mine tonight." On a private jet to the Middle East. Obadiah and Kingpin sat on either side of the plane, with a large table in the middle. Under the service of several blondes, the two people happily discuss cooperation. "Some time ago, Nick Fury found me." Obadiah's eyes squint hearing it. "People like them are in contact with people in the military of the country, the people who really have power. For Nick Fury's fame, he also heard it. The leader of a team of mysterious agents." Obadiah raised his hand, the wine in it, and quipped, "Did he come to you and want you to be a secret agent? Your body is not very suitable." Kingpin smiled and pulled out a tablet from his arms. Obadiah doubtfully took the tablet in his hand. The video above suddenly made Obadiah look at it seriously. "This is Tony's." "Wrong. If Tony had this, he wouldn't have been taken away by the 10 rings." Kingpin smiled and said, "I don't know who it is. Nick Fury asked me to find the owner of the Mac. Or find this macaw." Obadiah immediately asked, "Did you find anything?" Kingpin shook his head. "It can only be locked in the 13th block, and there is no news other than that." 13 block. Obadiah frowned. Kingpin also saw Obadiah's reaction and also sensed something. "Do you know something?" It's not clear, but something strange happened recently. Strange thing. Well, some time ago, Stark Industries stock was thrown out in large numbers by shareholders, and finally, it all flowed into an account in the 13th block. Oh. Kingpin also suddenly remembered that the stock he threw out was also acquired immediately. Did it also enter the 13th block? But because Stark Industries stock was too despairing at the time, Kingpin wasn't too concerned. But hearing that it is also in the 13th block, Kingpin plans to let his men check it out after he goes back. However, he didn't show it on his face and let Obadiah become suspicious and said, "I think it must be a coincidence. Maybe it's Tony's fan and believes Tony will come back to life." Obadiah sneered confidently, "Impossible. He will die. 2 gentlemen, we are about to land. Please fasten your seat belt." In the desert, there were a lot of camps, large and small. Here is the base of terrorists surrounded by KB members with weapons. And Kingpin and Obadiah strolled slowly toward the largest tent in the middle. The surrounding environment seemed to be incomparably familiar to them. Inside the tent, a stout middle-aged man saw 2 people entering and immediately stood up. He glanced at Kingpin and then at Obadiah. When Obadiah saw him, his face became distorted with anger, and asked, "Why didn't you kill Tony Stark directly? That man was the boss of the 10 Rings gang. The money you gave me and Tony Stark's life, the value Stark can offer to me is disproportionate. If we keep him, he can make me more weapons." Obadiah sneered hearing it and said sarcastically, "Did he make your weapons?" "Oh right, he made one, the weapon that almost killed you all." "You?" The 10 Rings leader looked at Obadiah and turned his head to show him the side of his face. They saw that the side of his face was full of vicious burns, which was left by the explosion caused by Tony when he escaped from the cave. "Although what you said is right. But I didn't lose either." The 10 Rings boss went to the middle of the tent, where there was a place where a large piece of cloth was covered. Taking the cover away, what was inside was the wreckage of Tony's Mark I armor. "This is Tony's tool he used to escape from the cave." Seeing this, Kingpin and Obadiah's eyes changed. Although the gap was huge, but it is not difficult to see that the eye design of this steel Mac is similar to the Macar that Nick Fury was looking for. Did Tony also see that Macar? Or maybe the Macar had something to do with Tony? Obadiah and Kingpin exchanged glances and the 2 of them tacitly agreed on something. This kind of talk cannot be discussed here. The boss of the 10 Rings gang, who also saw that, understood the 2 eye contact exchange as a shock to Mark I's armor. Confidently, he sat down next to Mark I. He is prepared to have a good talk with Obadiah about the terms. "Not only is this Macar, but I also have a design that Tony designed himself. I can give you all this." The boss of the 10 Rings looked at Obadiah and said. Obadiah smiled, "Oh. You don't want anything. I only have one condition. That is, you make these Macas. After you finish it, I want 10 sets of it. I believe that with these Macas, I can sweep across Asia." Obadiah and Kingpin look at the 10 Rings gang boss as if they were looking at a fool. "Just with this thing, you want to sweep across Asia? Wouldn't that be a foolish dream?" But although the 2 despised the man in their hearts, their faces remained calm. Because the 2 men had negotiated a plan on the way there. The clueless boss of the 10 Rings slowly stood up and walked over to Obadiah. "Agree to my terms and I'll give you all these things. I think you must have wanted it too, right?" He felt like he was holding Obadiah's neck this time. He didn't notice at all that Kingpin, who was beside Obadiah, had gone around behind him. The dragon-head crutch in his hand suddenly spat out a dagger and stabbed the Ten Rings boss in the back several times in a row. The Ten Rings boss, who didn't react, looked at Obadiah in disbelief. At this moment, there was a sound outside the tent, the sound of gunfire. Then it was quiet again. He knew that after tonight the Ten Rings had disappeared completely. Obadiah whispered in his ear, "What I hate most is people that threaten me." Outside the tent, the members of the Ten Rings were all piled up like garbage. "Find a few people and move all the items inside." Obadiah stepped out of the tent and commanded his men. After everyone left, a series of explosions drowned this sand desert into a sea of fire. Inside the New York Police Department, "Mr. Parker, I'm sure you should understand. Even if it was the mutated Mr. Connors the one who killed, there's no denying that those crimes were all committed by him. As for how to punish him in the end, it will be handed over to the law." After George finished interrogating Peter, he said to Peter, "I see." Peter looked lonely, and then continued to ask, "Then can I see him again?" After struggling for a while, George stood up and said, "Come with me." The two walked around the police station and finally came to a special room. Connors was alone in this room, tied to a hospital bed. His hands and feet were also tied. Now Connors is confined to the bed except for the head that can move, the rest of the body were strapped tightly. Hearing the sound of someone opening the door, Connors opened his eyes and looked. When he looked at Peter, hot tears flowed from his cloudy eyes. "Peter, I'm sorry." Peter walked to Connors and said with red eyes, "I'm sorry for you, Mr. Connors. I should have sensed something was wrong with you that night." George closed the door wisely, leaving the teacher and student one last minute. In the room, Connors looked at Peter and asked, "Peter, did you research those antigen drugs?" Peter nodded and spoke out about his deal with Norman Osborn. He thought that Connors would blame him, but Connors said with great relief, "Peter, it was me who was wrong. If I hadn't done everything myself, if I studied with you, maybe my regenerative gene reagent would have been successful long ago." Peter comforted, "It's over, Dr. Connors." George, who was waiting outside, looked at the time on his watch. "It's still early. I can go back to being with my family later." As soon as the major case was over, he, the sheriff, was free. After waiting for a while, Peter came out through the door. George patted Peter on the shoulder and said, "Go home first, I'll call you if I have anything." "Thank you, Mr. Stacy." Peter walked out of the gate of the police station and was about to take a taxi back. But a luxury car on the side of the road honked at him. Peter looked over curiously, and Norman stuck his head out of the window. "Hey, Peter. Waiting for the bus. Harry and I can take you home." Harry. In the back seat, Harry opened the door for Peter. "Peter, I'm sorry. My dad told me everything that happened. Get in the car and we'll take you home." "Thank you, Harry." Peter didn't refuse, got into Norman's car, and left the police station. After Peter walked out and rode away with the others, George put on his casual clothes and walked out of the police station briskly. After greeting everyone he met, he was ready to drive home. "I wonder if Gwen is home." George then remembered to turn on his mobile phone and found that there was an anonymous missed call on it. Just look at it and ignore it for now. After a few taps of his finger on the screen, he intends to make a call to Gwen and ask her if she was home. Let's do a surprise inspection. George thought about it and decided to make a surprise inspection. After putting down his phone, he stepped on the gas and left the NYPD. Not long after George left, a black sedan stopped in front of the New York Police Department. A man in Mediterranean glasses descended from above. Besides him, there are also several strong bodyguards. The moment several people appeared, it immediately attracted the attention of other police officers in the police station. Someone came up and asked, "Who are you?" As soon as he finished speaking, he didn't wait for the middle-aged Mediterranean man to respond. A fat middle-aged man quickly ran out of the police station, and other police officers saluted when they saw him. "You go back first, they are all people sent from above." The police officer who came to ask questions immediately left. Because the person in front of him is their deputy director. When he said above, he naturally meant that this person was at higher jurisdiction than their chief George. As they reached the gate of the police station, seeing no one was left, the fat man stepped forward and said softly, "Long live Hydra." The middle-aged Mediterranean man smiled and whispered, "Long live Hydra. Please come with me this way." Under the guidance of the deputy director, they soon came to the place where Connors was being held. The middle-aged man in the Mediterranean pushed the door and walked in. The others stayed outside to guard. After a while, the Mediterranean opened the door and came out and asked, "Where is Peter Parker, who worked with Osborne?" The deputy director sneered, "He wasn't imprisoned, George let him go." The Mediterranean frowned, and then left with the rest. Inside the room where Connors was being held. At this time, Connors stared blankly in the direction of the door, not knowing what he was thinking. "Ha!" In Ai's house, Gwen's voice resounded throughout the room. There was an indescribable sense of laziness in her voice, and it seemed to have a hint of pain. If other people heard it, they would think of some ambitious thoughts. At this time, on the bed in Gwen's room, I sat on Gwen's back and pulled her hands to stretch her back for her. Gwen, who had never been so relaxed before, had hardly any other thoughts than a comfortable hum. Because I's oriental mysterious massage bone setting is really comfortable. After doing a few more stretches, Gwen lay in I's arms. Unstoppable redness on her face. There was a persistent redness on her face. Gwen's shy face became hot at the thought of the sound she made just now. She didn't notice at all how torturous her posture was for I. Looking at Gwen's reaction, I also had a new understanding of Gwen's conservativeness. Such a conservative girl. I'm afraid that, in the whole of America, there are only a few. Good job. Thinking of this, I must give George a thumbs up. Gwen. I tried to call out Gwen in his arms. Gwen just gave a small hum in response. Asterisk snap, asterisk. Suddenly, I snapped his fingers. Afterwards, the lights in the house suddenly turned from pure white to warm yellow. These are some of the functions he has improved for the house during this period. It is very comfortable to use with the Red Queen's operation. Feeling the light change, Gwen raised her head in confusion. Gradually, her eyes met I's. Under such romantic lights, the emotion they felt suddenly became in tune. I, unable to hold back any longer, kissed Gwen gently. Gwen, in turn, trembled slightly. She didn't know why, but their emotions at this moment were in place. Just when I was about to make further advances, the light in the house suddenly jumped back to white again. The good mood disappeared in an instant. I's face immediately looked pitiful. What's the situation? It seems that I don't recall giving this order to Red Queen, did I? At this time, the voice of the Red Queen suddenly came, Master, Miss Gwen. George has already gone home. F at $%. I'll take back the paragraph I just complimented on you. Gwen panicked when she heard that George was going home. Although she dared to exchange thoughts with George after changing into the spider suit, Gwen still listened to George's words more at home. I'm sorry, I have to go back first. Red Queen, are my clothes ready? It's ready, Miss Gwen. Gwen rushed out of the room, changed into the spider outfit as quickly as possible, and packed the rest of the clothes into the bag. Standing on the railing of the balcony. See you tomorrow, I. After speaking, she swung out of I's house under her spider web. She didn't know why she was leaving so fast. Is it because I am really afraid of George, or because I am shy? Gwen, who was swinging with the help of spider web in the city, was blown by the cool breeze. The previous heat in the body also cooled down a lot. Thinking of the scene in the room just now, Gwen quickly stopped and shook her head violently. No, I is not my husband yet. Mom said before, that kind of thing can only be done with your husband. Yes. I is still just my boyfriend. He is, right? Gwen didn't know what to say, because, in Gwen's opinion, neither of them had officially confessed. Shaking off all the wild thoughts in her mind, Gwen spun her spider web and continued home. If I knew about Gwen's inner thoughts, he might be refreshed with his conservative understanding of Gwen again. Seeing Gwen leave, I's heart suddenly felt empty. But he quickly adjusted. Crossing his legs on the yoga mat, he began tonight's spiritual practice. Tony's house. Pepper, who was waiting for Tony to come up and explain to him on the first floor, became a little uneasy. She felt that since the last time Tony was kidnapped, Tony who came back was a completely different person. Tony unloaded the Mark III and walked up from the basement. He was holding something like a USB stick in his hand. Seeing that little Pepper was still waiting for him, his heart suddenly warmed. Hey, Potts. Are you busy now? Little Pepper turned around and said, except for serving you and the company's affairs. I don't seem to have anything else to do. Then do me a favor. Tony handed the black USB flash drive into Little Pepper's hand. Go to my office and insert this USB flash drive into the main computer. Jarvis will hack in and get all the recent shipping lists. If I get the shipping list back, what will you do? Little Pepper asked Tony worriedly. Like today, find them and destroy them. Pepper continued, Tony, you know I'm willing to do anything for you, but if you're going to mess up like you are now, I can't help you. If you must ask me to do it, I will resign. Tony knew that Pepper was worried about him. She should also be now, the only person who would be so worried about his safety. Tony hugged Pepper who wanted to leave and said, Potts, I'm not going to take risks. Trust me. I just figured out what to do, and I knew in my heart that it was the right thing to do. Little Pepper never thought that the Tony she knew who was a viper, strong, cynical, and playboy on weekdays, would actually have a soft side at this moment. Little Pepper sighed, and finally said the words that had been in her heart for a long time, you know what? You got me. After everything was said, she took the USB flash drive and turned around and leave. Tony looked at Pepper's back, then turned his head and said, Yinsen, don't hide behind and peek next time. Yinsen came over with a glass of green leaf juice. Tony, I was not hiding. I just arrived. Thank you. Tony took the green juice, although it tasted bad. He had no choice but to drink it. Haven't found a new element as a replacement yet. Yinsen asked worriedly. Tony shook his head. Jarvis has been simulating. I think there should be a result after a while. Jarvis, come on. We need to continue improving the suit. No problem, sir. On a private jet. Obadiah held Tony's Mark I blueprint in his hands, and his eyes widened in surprise. He's really a genius. And you still want to kill him, shouldn't it be a better choice to keep him? Kingpin asked as he was wiping the blood from his dragon-headed cane. But I hate geniuses the most, like Howard, so does Tony. Obadiah picked up the phone and made a call, set up Area 16 under the arc reactor and set it as top secret. Tony has no right to interfere. Get the engineers together, now. See you in 2 hours. Empire State University. George's car stopped steadily at the school gate. Looking at Gwen, who got out of the car and walked to the school, George shook off the car and stopped Gwen. Wait, Gwen. Dad, is there anything else? I'll go home early tonight and have a meal together. Call your friend by the way. Yes, him. Invite him to dinner. Gwen froze for a moment, like a child who was discovered to have done something bad. The tone became a little nervous and stuttered. Then, I will ask him when I see him later. Okay, I'll wait for your good news. Watching George leave, Gwen felt uneasy. Has he found something? Gwen walked into the campus, wondering where she was exposed. But it seems that George has only met AI once. Just when Gwen was in a trance, AI patted Gwen on the shoulder from behind. Miss Spider-Woman, what are you thinking? Gwen was startled and turned around to see AI with a sunny smile. Hey, you scared me. Why doesn't my spider sense work for you? AI smiled and said, I didn't mean to harm you, I just wanted to say hello to you. Gwen nodded, realizing this too. The spider sense has always predicted danger, it really didn't predict someone saying hello. Gwen walked beside AI, making various small movements with her hands restlessly. She didn't know how to tell AI that her father invited him to dinner tonight. And this is also the first time she has invited a boy to eat at her house. How can I speak without being so awkward? Gwen walked for a long time before she said, do you know? This sentence made AI a little confused. What do I know? Go ahead, Gwen. That's it. Dr. Connors was picked up early this morning. Gwen's words took a sudden turn. AI's eyes narrowed, realizing that something was wrong. If Connors had been picked up by formal channels this morning, the Red Queen should have told him the news. But this morning, the Red Queen said nothing. This made AI feel that something was wrong. Who picked him up? Gwen recalled, I don't know, Dad went out to answer a phone call at breakfast this morning. Told him when he came back that Dr. Connors had been picked up by the person in charge of this case. Hearing this explanation, AI didn't think about it any further. After all, the intricate level of the internal forces of the United States of America is far more than it looks on the surface. Maybe those people are doing something else. But none of this mattered to AI. He only paid more attention to Connors also just because it was related to Gwen. Compared with the fact that Connors was taken away, AI was more curious about the current Gwen. Taking another look at her, he saw that Gwen was hesitant to speak. It seemed like she had something to tell him. Gwen, is there anything else you want to tell me? Gwen, who was seen through, blushed, is it that obvious? AI nodded, indicating that it was very obvious. Gwen's two fingers kept clicking together, and after being tangled for a while, she said, "It's just, my father, he wants me to invite you to dinner tonight." I smiled, "No problem, I'll go back with you after school. Now let's go to class." After saying it, Gwen felt much more relaxed. Naturally, she took Ai's arm and walked toward the classroom. Not far from where the two left, Peter stood behind a tree and looked away, watching Gwen's back. After staring for a long time, he muttered to himself, "Gwen, you are Spider-Woman, aren't you?" When Gwen disappeared from view, Peter turned to leave and walked outside the school. After arriving outside the school gate, Peter took a taxi. The taxi driver said kindly, "Where are you going, sir?" "Osborne Industries." Osborne Industrial Entrance. Norman Osborne stood at the door in a straight suit, as if waiting for someone important. After a while, Norman looked in the direction of the crowd and smiled. He raised his hand and waved, "Hey, Peter." Peter also noticed Norman and walked over with a frown. He can still remember what happened last night. After Norman sent him home, he deliberately brought up Connor's arrest for illegal experiments in front of Uncle Ben and Aunt May. Then, in front of the two old fellows, he threw an olive branch from Osborne Industries to Peter. He would like to recruit Peter as an intern at Osborne Industries and be his immediate assistant. Then, under the persuasion of the second old man and Peter's own thoughts, he agreed to Norman's request. Walking in front of Norman, Peter's expression was a little unsightly. "Norman, what happened last night? I don't want it to happen a second time. I don't like the feeling of being led by the nose." This time, Peter even omitted Norman's honorific title. There was a hint of warning in his tone. Norman smiled shyly, "Soon, you will understand my good intentions. I also promise you that the same thing will never happen again." Although Peter didn't believe it, he still nodded. "Shall we go to your laboratory next?" "Don't worry, I'll take you to meet a few people first." "Who?" "You'll know when we arrive." Norman patted Peter on the shoulder and led Peter to Osborne Industries. Along the way, Peter also understands that his understanding of Osborne Industries is still too shallow. Along the way, he saw research that he had never known before. Looking at Peter's surprised look, Norman said with a smile, "Don't be too surprised. When a company develops to a certain level, it will no longer stick to one direction. A lot of technologies have a similar distance in the end." Peter nodded in agreement. Although Peter didn't like Norman a little now, this person's scientific attainments are beyond his reach at this time. "We're here, just ahead." Norman pointed to a hatch in the front. Walking to the front and back, Norman took out two white coats and let Peter put them on. Then he said solemnly, "After you go in, don't talk without my indication." After Peter agreed, Norman swiped his ID card. When the hatch opened slowly, Norman didn't forget to tidy up his clothes, which showed how much he attached importance to the people inside. Peter couldn't help but feel a little curious. Who are the people in here? To be treated by Norman so carefully. As the hatch opened, Peter heard a very unhappy voice, "I have seen the glider. You should know that I am not here for this. General, please wait a moment. Mr. Norman will be here soon." Hearing this dissatisfied voice, Norman immediately walked over quickly. "Hey, General." Peter, who was behind Norman, immediately followed. When he saw the people in the laboratory, his pupils also shrank sharply. The people in front of him, in addition to the internal scientists and engineers of Osborne Industries. The rest are all soldiers in military green uniforms with medals all over their bodies. And every official position is not low. There are a few of them, and Peter can often see them on TV. The person Norman wanted to show him was actually a member of the American military. Norman walked to the front and greeted everyone one by one. "Your Excellency, are you dissatisfied with my glider?" Norman walked up to a grey-haired man with a very respectful attitude. Although the man was full of white hair, he was still in good spirits. Next to where Norman was standing, was a glider like a bat wing. At this time, it is being suspended in the air by the test personnel for a test flight. And the state is very stable. Seeing Norman come to him, the general smiled. "I've been waiting for you for a while." "Who is this?" When the general saw Peter behind Norman behind him, the fresh face made him wary. "My new assistant, Peter Parker. A very talented young man." Having said that, Norman approached the general, "A person who is very important to our cooperation." After listening to Norman's words, the general looked at Peter's eyes and couldn't help but look up a bit. When Peter met those falcon-like eyes, he felt a chill on his back. "Peter, say hello to the general." Norman's reminder brought Peter back to his senses and said, "Hello, General." The white-haired general nodded and said nothing more. Instead, he looked at Norman and said, "Our cooperation must be accelerated." Norman frowned and asked suspiciously, "Why?" "Tony Stark dismantled all arms trading operations of Stark Industries. You should know about this." Norman nodded. "The whole world knows, that's why the stock of Stark Industries has been slumped now." "But what does that have to do with our cooperation?" Norman asked inexplicably. "Do you remember what I mentioned to you about artificial mechas?" The white-haired general continued. "Of course, but Your Excellency, General, with the current technological strength, it is not difficult to create a powerful artificial mecha. The only misery is in energy. To support the activities of a man-made mecha, the energy needed is extremely large and portable." The white-haired general sneered and waved to an accompanying official behind him. The officer came up with a stack of papers. The white-haired general took it and handed it to Norman. Norman opened the file bag suspiciously. General Whitehair continued, "Just yesterday, an F-22 fighter jet of the military was crashed by an unknown weapon. Not long ago, satellites captured a mysterious object flying at extremely high speeds over New York City. And these two things, without exception, both are humanoids. And they are all related to Stark Industries." Norman also opened the file bag at this time and looked at the photos and various analysis materials above. His face gradually became serious. After a long time, 4 words came out of his mouth: "This is impossible." Norman didn't want to believe it, but the facts were right in front of him. He knew very well that the white-haired general couldn't joke with him about such a thing. Has Tony Stark solved the most troublesome energy problem in the technology world? The white-haired general nodded. "I think this is the only explanation that can explain why Tony suddenly closed the weapons department of Stark Industries. Because now he has more profitable inventions. From what I know about the Stark family, they will never give this technology to the military. He won't hand over the technology of the mecha." The white-haired general looked at Norman and said word by word, "I don't allow such uncontrolled forces to appear in this country. Norman, start the human enhancement test immediately. You have to make me another Captain America. Even more." If it was before, Norman might not have had confidence, but now Peter's joining has greatly increased his confidence in this project. Especially seeing Howard's son, who has grown to such heights now. There was an indescribable depression in his heart. Not as good as Howard. Could it be better than his son now? Peter, who was behind Norman, also finished listening to the conversation between the two. The shock in his heart is difficult to describe right now. He also finally understood what Norman meant to him about surpassing Howard earlier. Norman Osborn squeezed the information in his hand tightly and said with a gleam in his eyes, "Of course, General. I came to see you today to tell you. The new Captain America project can be launched. Boss Kingpin, everything has been checked." Inside the Kingpin's office, a middle-aged man wearing glasses respectfully reported to Kingpin. "How's it going? Have all the stocks I sold been found to have flowed into those accounts?" "Yes, boss. A very small part of them were taken away by some scattered retail investors, and most of them flowed into the same account. The address of the account went to the 13th block, just as boss guessed." Kingpin narrowed his eyes. Combined with what Obadiah said last night, there's really a guy in block 13 who's buying up Stark Industries stock on a grand scale. The approximate location of the Golden Macar is also in the 13th block. Is this all coincidence? Kingpin continued to ask, "Has the name of the account been found?" "I found it. It's a person named I. Kingpin stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, overlooking New York. His fingers tapped on the faucet's crutch. He didn't speak and the office was so quiet that if a needle was dropped, it could be heard. "Go check this I. Focus on investigating his relationship with Stark Industries," Kingpin ordered. "Yes, Boss Kingpin." "What's the matter, is there anything else?" Kingpin turned his head and found that the subordinate was still there and hadn't left. "That's right, boss. Recently, Spider-Woman has also started fighting crime like Daredevil in New York. At one point, she also injured some of the brothers below." Hearing this, Kingpin unconsciously squeezed the dragon-headed crutch he was holding. With a sneer, he said, "Spider-Woman, Daredevil, he. Don't worry about them, someone will help us deal with these two heroes after a while." The word hero made Kingpin grit his teeth hard. It can be seen that he is full of resentment towards Spider-Woman and Daredevil. When the subordinate left, Kingpin looked out the floor-to-ceiling window again. Looking outside, he had a distant look, specifically, at the most prestigious building in New York. Stark Industries. Kingpin was also looking forward to what Obadiah will look like after taking over Stark Industries after he successfully killed Tony. As long as Obadiah took over Stark Industries, the black weapons industry chain in the global underground black market will be dominated by his family in the future. By then, the world's money will be in his pocket like a money printing machine. It should be said that saying it as a money printing machine was not so exaggerated at all. More importantly, he could also use this to develop his underground kingdom beyond American soil. "Obadiah, don't let me down. I've lost a big client just for you." Inside Stark Industries, Pepper was wearing a work uniform and walked straight to Tony's office. Although it was Tony's office, it's just that Tony has rarely come to the company to do things. Of course, according to Tony's character, it is unlikely to sit in the office for a day. So naturally, this became Obadiah's office. Little Pepper looked around and found no one before pushing the door open and walking in. Holding the USB flash drive Tony gave her, she walked straight to the computer and checked the USB flash drive. There were no operations required, and Tony's own program will search out all the orders during this period. Little Pepper looked at the files in front of her, and suddenly her eyes moved. A design drawing appeared in front of Little Pepper. "This is The macaw on this blueprint is very similar to the one in Tony's own studio. The only difference is that the macaw in Obadiah's computer is heavier and larger. If Tony's macaw is biased towards a humanoid shape, that Obadiah is as large as a chimpanzee. The 13th District. What does Obadiah want to do? Pepper found that the project was being carried out in the newly opened pilot department. But she and Tony were completely unaware that this new department was carrying out such a project. Just when little Pepper thought she had discovered important information, a video appeared on the computer screen. And it made little Pepper completely panic. There were several terrorists on the screen, and a person was tied in the middle of this group. Although he was wearing a burlap hood, little Pepper recognized it at a glance. The scarred, burlap-hooded man in the video was Tony. This was when Tony was kidnapped. Why did Obadiah have this video? Immediately afterward, the voice in the video came out. You didn't tell us that the person you were going to kill was the famous Tony Stark. Therefore, Obadiah Stane, you will pay dearly for your lies. Tony Stark's head price has gone up. I never thought that the person you were going to kill was the famous Tony Stark. Pepper finally understood that everything that happened was Obadiah's conspiracy. I have to take it all back and show it to Tony. Little Pepper was concentrating on checking Obadiah's other criminal evidence and did not notice that Obadiah had pushed open the door at this time. Seeing Pepper in front of the computer, Obadiah suddenly said, Miss Potts, what do you think we should do next? Pepper was so frightened that she looked out the door. At the same time, she put a magazine on the USB flash drive on the table. Good afternoon, Obadiah. Pepper resisted, trying to keep herself speaking. Obadiah also found something unusual, but he didn't openly react. Just pretended to pour drinks at the bar, while talking to Pepper about what Tony has done to the company recently. While slowly approaching the computer. Meanwhile, at the office downstairs, Coulson was sitting on a bench. A waiter came over and brought him a cup of coffee. Please wait a moment, Mr. Stark's assistant, Miss Potts, is in the office now. Coulson nodded and thanked him. Today happened to be the time he and Tony made an appointment to meet. But he couldn't find Tony anywhere, so he could only look for Pepper. After a while of having coffee, Coulson heard the sound of the office door opening. He immediately stood up and found that it was indeed Miss Pepper Potts who came down, but her expression was a little rushed. Miss Potts, we made an appointment, have you forgotten? Seeing this person, Pepper immediately remembered that it was the agent Tony had told her about. Saved. No, I didn't forget, you can come with me now. Now. Yes, now, follow me. Looking at the anxious little Pepper, Coulson immediately realized that something was wrong. She was seeking his protection. Coulson walked over to Pepper and followed her out of Stark Industries. In the corridor on the second floor, Obadiah, who watched the two leave, smashed the railing hard. After little Pepper left, he turned on the computer and found that the important data had been copied. It means that Tony will find out what he was doing when Pepper leaves. Obadiah immediately picked up a mobile phone and made a call. Block the Stark Industrial Park, important research data has been leaked. No one is allowed to go out, remember, no one. Okay, Tony. You forced me yourself. I wanted you to live a few more days. Obadiah walked into the elevator and pressed the bottom floor. The 16th District Laboratory. Many engineers are doing the final debugging for a big steel guy. Suddenly, Obadiah pushed the door open and entered. Aggressively walked towards the chief engineer. The chief engineer, William Ginter Reaver, saw Obadiah coming, and immediately greeted him. It seems a little bit difficult. The chief engineer thought for a while, then changed his mind and said, it should be said that it is difficult. Difficult? Obadiah looked at the chief engineer with uncontrollable anger in his eyes. Tony can build a set of mecha in a garbage place like a cave. There is the most advanced equipment in the world, but you are telling me it is difficult. Yes, sir. The functional technology of this mecha has not yet appeared. Mr. Stain, the task you gave us. Obadiah interrupted him, wait, what is it that hasn't appeared yet? Then what is this? Obadiah suddenly grabbed the chief engineer's neck and asked him to look at the archetype reactor on top. William, the technology is here. All you have to do is shrink it a bit and put it in there. Engineer William said helplessly, we tried our best, but we really can't do it. Tony Stark made it all in the cave, using only a pile of scrap metal. Obadiah roared. We're not Tony Stark. Obadiah stroked his bald head with both hands, his eyes full of anger. But could not vent. In the end, Obadiah's eyes flashed a hint of ruthlessness. Tony, I have no other choice but to borrow the last thing from you. Outside Stark Industries. At this time the night has slowly come. Pepper and Coulson are both in her office. Because of the blockade Obadiah had set, they could not get out at all. During this period, Pepper kept calling Tony, but she couldn't get through. Still can't get through? Coulson asked. I think he's in that studio again, thinking what to do by himself, so Jarvis doesn't bother him. Tony does this all the time and doesn't want anyone to disturb him when he thinks about things. And it included Jarvis, which will be temporarily shut down by him. That's right, Yinsen. Pepper quickly dialed Yinsen's phone. She kept praying that Yinsen would answer the phone quickly. Soon, Yinsen's voice came from the other end of the phone. Yinsen, where is Tony? Find him. Tony. I'm not at home. Tony said he wants to study new elements by himself, so he let me leave first. Then where are you now? Is it close to his home? If I rush back, it will take 20 minutes. Now, go back. Tell Tony that Obadiah is going to kill him. Yinsen on the other end of the phone also immediately realized the seriousness of the matter. Okay, I'll rush back right away. Little Pepper held the phone, thinking about who else to notify. Then she pressed a second number on the phone. Hey, Rhodes. Hey Pepper. Didn't expect you to call me. Colonel James Rhodes, who was driving, said in surprise. Then, Rhodes' expression became serious. What do you mean he hired someone to kill Tony? Pepper, speak slowly. Okay, where is Tony now? I don't know. He didn't answer my call. Please go to his house to confirm. Thanks, Rhodes. Pepper hung up the phone and said to Coulson, we can't sit still here. Coulson thought for a while. You come with me. Pepper did not hesitate and immediately followed Coulson. Tony's house. Tony was alone in the basement studio, looking at the various elements in front of him, constantly calculating the possibility of them reacting to each other. It's been a long time. Tony pinched his bloated glasses and said, it seems that finding new elements is not an easy task. Right, Jarvis. No one responded. Almost forgot, you're on vacation again. The rare cleanliness made Tony not start Jarvis's program first, but picked up the leaf green juice on the table and walked upstairs. Sitting on the sofa. Only then did he notice that there were several missed calls from Pepper on the phone. When he picked up his phone and was about to call Pepper back, Muted piercing sound wave rang in his ears. Under this sound wave, Tony's veins suddenly burst, and his face became extremely pale. "Hey, Tony. What you invented is such a convenience." Obadiah, who was behind him, took the mobile phone from Tony's hand. In his other hand, he held a black device. Tony knew exactly what it was. A gadget he invented once, a sonic taser. It can emit fixed ultrasonic sound, affecting various capabilities of ordinary people's bodies. This can lead to paralysis or even death. This is really a good thing. It's a pity that the government did not approve its production. With that said, Obadiah put Tony away. He took out the instrument he brought beforehand and thought about the reactor in front of Tony's chest. He then proceeded to take away the reactor in Tony's chest, making Tony grunt in pain. "Tony, I have to admit it now. Maybe your father, Howard, was not as good as you." Obadiah played with the reactor in his hand, and the soft blue light made him compliment Tony. "Please? Tony. In return for you. I'm not going to change the name of Stark Industries. In return for your contribution, I will not change the name of Stark Industries." That's it, guys. Hope you like the video. Like, share and subscribe the channel if you like it. And tell me in the comment section down below if you have any recommendation.